And then we broke down a lot of the questions based on those answers. So I'm happy to say that when I got the results of this, I so fell more in love with my job than I had before, because on this very show, on this very last show, I had a hypothesis that there were equal amounts of people who would be more likely to travel if there was a face mask ordinance versus not. And lo and behold, the data says that. So we had just under 50% that said face masks didn't matter, not going to change their decision. And then like 25% each of those who'd be more likely to travel because of an ordinance versus not. So that's what the data says. We also asked if the, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just said, wow. It's like, wow.
Yeah. We asked if the increase in COVID cases was impacting vacation plans for 2020. Not surprising. We had almost 63% that said yes, it is impacting. But then you break that down by people who want a mask ordinance, by those who don't want a mask ordinance. 75% impacted by those who prefer a mask ordinance versus 57% that do not want a mask ordinance. So people who are mask free or want to be mask free are more willing to go travel in spite of the COVID cases increase. So that was fun. We also asked a new question. This was based on, I think, Lauren, your request last time about the likelihood of taking different types of trips. So we talked about camping or going in an RV, a VRBO versus a professionally managed vacation rental and staying just in a regular old hotel. And we asked, are you more likely, less likely, or unchanged with the impact of coronavirus? Across the board, every one of those categories was much less likely because of coronavirus. It ranged from 40 to over 60% on the negative side. The one that had the most positive uptick was staying in a professionally managed vacation rental. That had a 20% increase in people saying more likely to do this type of vacation. So I thought that was interesting. Just 12% were positive on staying in a hotel. Aside from that, again, we definitely saw some differences of those people who were looking for a mask ordinance versus not. Obviously, people who were not wanting a mask ordinance more positive on all things. So that was pretty consistent throughout. One of the next big changes was asking about what could persuade you to book a vacation during the outbreak. Now, this is one we've asked on every single round of the survey. So this is number 7. While the top choices have remained steady, that people want flexibility to change without penalty, the number of people saying that they could not be persuaded now for the first time went up. This number has been declining survey after survey after survey. We were down to 16% 3 weeks ago. We're back up to 27% of people who could not be persuaded right now. It's a big jump, which we're back up to probably 4 or 5 versions ago of that survey where that number was that high. No comments from the peanut gallery. I got nothing going on.
You know, it really makes a lot of sense. The kinds of vacations that I've seen my friends sharing are, for people who live in New Mexico, going to the desert or something somewhere and being kind of alone. The whole glamping thing. I even saw one friend of mine glamping in Fire Island, which is kind of glamour camping. Everybody's trying to steal the African safari experience and somehow bring it to something within driving distance of places people can drive to. And that sounds wonderful. I've seen people go to wineries, very, very well social distanced outside. That's beautiful. On the other hand, Manhattan had 17% occupancy, a $47 RevPAR last week. There's nobody going for fun, right? Even though our hospitalization and our COVID cases and everything have gone, down 99%. It's just not there yet.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
well, and I think in certain markets, right? Like New York, right? I want to go see a Broadway play. I want to like all the things that I just can't do. But I also think, last week we talked about that USA Today article, right? That, three people's opinions and they deem that travel is unsafe and don't travel. And I think we're seeing the results of that kind of news media in this survey.
Yeah.
I want to travel. I had booked a trip to go to Disneyland, although that obviously had to get pushed back because they're not open. So, um, but I think we're seeing the news coverage and all the things about the rise in cases in markets like Florida and even here in California. And people are getting, the ones that believe it's real are getting leery. And I think your survey is showing those results, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think Disney World, though, is open, and I'm really rooting for them because if they can make a case that it's possible to have an attraction that is well organized and social distance, that would be an amazing case study to show people that if you make responsible choices, maybe you can do it. So I'm wishing for the best. I
Yeah,
want.
the whole industry needs to have that mindset. I've seen so many people like, oh, they're going to close down, or the media's going to jump on them as soon as there's an outbreak, and we need to root the other way hard and encourage that narrative because right now we're fighting several wars right now. One of them we talked about last week is an information war from the mainstream media, and there's no one really standing up other than U.S. travel's beginning to. But I've not really seen any major organizations stand up against what the narrative is being dictated in the media. And we as hospitality professionals that have voices, every one of us, everyone listening, has a role to play in spreading the word that responsible travel is safe. That's the key sentence that everyone needs to believe. And we even had it last week when Holly was on and said, well, travel's not safe. And everyone kind of jumped on her. It's like, we can't be spreading that rhetoric. Because if you behave appropriately, traveling in your vehicle, taking the right precautions, avoiding risky behavior, you're not in any more danger than you are staying at your house and going to your grocery store and going to a local restaurant. So we got to change the zeitgeist that's happening right now. Because if we don't, 2020 is dead. We're completely out of it because we've got business travel. All of the Fortune 500 companies have said business travel is not returning this year in any meaningful way. We're predicting maybe we're going to be at 15, 20% of business travel by Q4. That's catastrophic to a lot of hotels, especially in inner cities. We see that groups are not going to really come back this year. Conventions certainly aren't going to come back this year. High tech, the hospitality convention just canceled for 2020 and is going virtual. So if hospitality conventions aren't coming back, you better believe non-hospitality ones are not. So we can only rely on surviving this year through leisure transient travel. And we're going to have to create new market segments within that, like work from a hotel instead of work at home and, staycation type packages. But we've got to get people traveling. We have to tell them that it's safe, and we have to ensure that it is safe by encouraging people to be responsible when they travel as well.
Yeah. And I've also been disappointed to hear, hoteliers say, well, right now the experience doesn't really matter. We're not going to have this, that, the other thing, the other thing, the other thing, and the other thing. We're just that, yeah, all people really want now is a clean room. But if you're going to be a commodity, then you better be the cheapest one with the most space. If there's always going to be somebody else that has twice as big a room at half the price, you know, your your reputation, your brand that you've built, and that vision of that experience that's going to be in that hotel is going to be shot. Um, I think that people will make their choice based on the fact that you are enabling them to have experiences in a safe way.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Lauren. Do people think that business travel is going to come back in any kind of meaningful way? And the reason why I asked this question is because I always believed it would. I always believed in the face to face, in the you have a more meaningful business conversation or connection with somebody when you meet face to face. However, I read an absolutely brilliant article by a chap called Mark Ritson. I put it on my LinkedIn last night. Sorry, this morning, where he wrote a very fascinating story about his wife's yoga teacher. Basically, this guy's now thinking, hey, I'm not going to come out to you and teach you yoga because he was a personal one-on-one yoga teacher. I'm going to do it all online. But what he's not realised is now that there's global competition, and where you had a localized market, you're now in a global market space. So if these Fortune 500s and everybody's saying we're not doing business travel, are they actually going to be thinking, well, you know what? I don't actually have to spend on airline and hotel. I can get just as good a deal done via Zoom, and we're now all going to be Zooming. I was originally no, it's all going to come back, and now with what you've mentioned there, Stuart, I'm not so sure it's going to come back quite as quickly as we're all hoping. What's everybody else's thoughts?
I've heard people say that they've already told their employees not to travel until 2021.
One wave that we have to go through, I think, is the legality wave. We haven't yet. We haven't gone through the obligations of companies asking or mandating or requiring their staff to begin to function in a person-to-person experience with the persistent threat that we're still facing right now, or concern that we're facing right now, I should say. And what does that mean? That if we have a person that we tell has to go and face-to-face and they end up contriving and getting COVID in some capacity, what is the obligation of the company that sent them? What's the obligation of the company they visited? What's the obligation of the traveling that they did? There's no, right now, we're already seeing hotels begin to integrate into their check-in process a release that says, you're not getting it here, or you at least can't tell us you got it here because we're doing all the things we're being told to do and we can't control nature. And so you're getting this in this process, and I'm sure the airlines are soon to follow if they already haven't already, because I haven't flown to see what the disclaimers are anymore. So you're getting the legal wave of this as well. And yeah, to your point, it does open up. This is, from an opportunity point of view, a great thing, because now I can be here and sell somebody in Budapest. Why not? Because I can offer them services that maybe the person locally wasn't able to do. But the personalization, as you refer, is probably gone. I want to bring up an analogy of, and it's weird because I brought up in a presentation just a couple of days ago, the Civil War, of how technology or circumstance changed, but the strategy didn't. Technology improved by the weapons for the Civil War, way ahead of the strategies that were being used. Men lined up in a straight line and they shot at each other, just like they did before. Well, before, the bullets didn't go very far and they weren't very big, and usually most of the time they hit in trees and not people. Well, the guns got really, really good in comparison by the time of the Civil War. So when the people lined up, they were shooting and maiming and killing a whole lot more people because the technology improved. Well, what we're dealing right now is when we came out of the first wave of this, where we opened back up, we used the same strategies we had. It's like they dusted the thing off and said, okay, we're going back into business again. And a lot of companies came back into market with the same strategy that they went into the problem with. Problem was, we fell flat on our face. We took the demand because it was pent up demand, but there was no real anything other than different. And now we're facing this second resentence of business, this concern that the survey is pointing out of people not potentially wanting to travel. But there's no new strategies that are coming to market for most of these businesses. They're just like, well, we don't understand. We're doing everything we did before, and it's not working. It's not producing what it should produce from what they think it is. So our strategies need to change going into what we're doing right now. As you pointed out, Stuart, we have to rely on certain sources of business. And so our messaging, our content, our methodologies all have to change towards leaning into that, and just put the other stuff on the shelf for right now. Not ignore it, but it's not something that we need to be spending a vast amount of money towards because the productivity is not there.
It's hard to do when you have a hotel that The finances are done in such a way that it's built to have 92% occupancy at $375 average rate, and it just can't manage on 17% occupancy at $125 average rate. It's just a money losing proposition. It's better to just close it, hold out, or become a resident,
Yeah,
Well, that's
the
the
reality.
nature of competition, and that's the nature of business and changing markets now, isn't it? We have got a completely different marketplace, and we're already seeing it. There are businesses are closing out in many industries, not just the hospitality industry. There are going to be hotels that are going to close. That is a fact, and it's a very sad and horrible and terrible fact for our industry. One that I am incredibly passionate about. But on the flip side of that, you're also going to have less hotels competing in that pool now. So in itself, it's almost like a natural balance, a natural order. It's going to correct itself. The hotels that cannot make a business model out of this are going to struggle and are either going to shut up or close or sell and come back again in the future at some point when it's better. But the ones that can make it work, they're the ones that are going to survive. It's the ones that are going to come out of this and have a much bigger market share than they would have done previously. I've read so many things that saying if the worst time to build a business, to start a business, is during a recession or during a financial crisis. And Ben and I have taken that completely to heart and gone out and set up a business in a recession and a crisis. That's it. Because the flip side of that is some of the best run companies out there are the ones that were set up in 2008. Some of the biggest, highest valued companies out there were ones that have been created lean and can survive anything. So there is going to be a natural selection to this. You've just got to hope that you're not one of the ones that has been naturally cut, and that survival of the fittest to coin that phrase.
The things that pop up during recessions and times of famine rather than feast, you're already running lean, because you don't have anything to spend apart from your crippling Diet Coke addiction. Like, our running costs are quite low, whereas compared to some other.
I've moved to other more popular brands as well.
Other brands are available. But compared to some of the other agencies and other companies out there who may be carrying more, who may be more abundant in terms of staff because they're still trailing on when times were good, and that's going to translate to hotels as well. If you don't have running costs and you're sort of just in a holding pattern until things get better, then I think there's wins to be had.
Yeah, and Lily's not on the show, but she's talked about this a lot recently in her presentations about understanding what your fixed costs are and then what your costs are as you scale up. Everyone has to go through that exercise and plan for the worst. And I just see, as I'm citing the ghosts of shows past, Tim has a really good thought exercise that he uses in life in general, and I've started adopting, and I think it's really good. He plays a wager game. So he tries to place a bet on what he thinks, because nothing's absolute, right? So Trish, you asked the question, is business travel ever going to come back? Well, in 1,000 years from now, it's probably going to be back and higher than it ever was, right? But a year from now, 2 years from now, what would you bet? What would you be willing to bet that business travel is going to be back in a meaningful way in 2020?
I wouldn't buy a Pepsi Max. This is my wager. It's unopened. You're okay.
All right. So, but would you bet by the end of 2021 it's going to be back to 50%? Probably. So I think you've got to kind of hedge a little bit and say, okay, the reality is probably that business travel is going to be marginal in the rest of this year. So how do I adjust to that? How do I remain profitable or not? Like, to your point, Adele, maybe I need to close my doors permanently, or maybe I need to sell my asset. But you need to be running through these thought exercises now, given what we know, but be prepared to pivot, because the one thing that we've all learned throughout the last 4 or 5 months is what we think is going to happen tomorrow is not what happens. Not one of us was sitting here 3 weeks ago beginning to see the recovery saying, no, we're going to be hurting. We're going to be back to where we were 6 weeks ago, 2 weeks from now. So there's so much uncertainty. All you can do is sort of make your best guess of the future and then prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But you got to have a strategy, because without having a strategy, you're screwed, and you're going to be one of the ones that don't survive, and you're going to.
I don't know whether Tris, you and I, whether or not we disagree on this. And it'd be interesting.
Okay, come on then.
I don't know if we do.
Well, I'm good at it anyway.
I think business travel is absolutely scuppered. That's a
Translate that.
That's an English term. Suggests that it might be beyond repair eventually. I don't think it's coming back, and here's why. The media over here, at least, is full of images of the deserted centre of London. TfL, Transport for London, took a $1.6 billion bailout from the government because it was about to go bust. There's nobody in London travelling anymore because everyone's working from home. There was an article, I think it was this week, and I'll find it and send it out, saying in some of the big consultation companies in London, 1% to 2% of the workforce are going back into the offices. There's just people working from home, and the initial panic of everybody going, "Oh, how are we ever going to get this? We've done it like this for 200 years. How can people work from?" Hold on a second. We seem to do really well with everybody working from home. I don't need to spend $500,000 a month in this city centre location. And I think as they realise those cost savings as the months tick on and on and on, coming out of this, that the money in the bank is going to be incredibly useful. I don't think there's going to be the push to go back into the office of people. On the back of that, I think as it becomes more normal not to travel and see people face to face, I'm trying not to be overly negative about this here, but I just don't see a reason. I think eventually the whole, it's nice to shake someone's hand. Hold on, put your pen down. Yeah, put your pen down.
Disagree there, buddy.
Well, I know you finished yet. Pop that
No,
pen
they don't
right
know. They
down,
don't know. No.
I think eventually people get used to just it not happening, whether or not it'll be a short or a medium term thing. There's such a thing as sort of being all zoomed out. But I think on the back of the working from home being such a success and companies not losing money, everyone, other than people who think, yeah, I could give my expense account a bit of a kick in here and take a jolly down to London, I don't think we're going to see it come back. Tris, what do you think?
Well, Ben, I'm glad you asked. I think you're perhaps mixing two different types of things there. Cost-saving exercises from a business that no longer needs an operating centre to put people in who are going to sit by the photocopier or the water cooler and gossip for half of their.
Which is still a noble profession, Tris.
It is indeed. I think we managed to do that very well in our last job. But I think you're mixing that with new business and sales. I still think the element of face to face from a business point of view will diminish, perhaps, yes, but I don't think it'll ever die. Hang on, put your pen down. My turn. I have the microphone. So I wonder if there is an opportunity here, because if we've no longer got city centres full of businesses and people going there, and everybody's distributed across the country because we're all working from home, we're then going to need places for us to meet face to face to do business. Where better than to do that than in a hotel? There you go, everybody. I've just top tipped by Tristan here. But then, I believe you may have a counter.
Good point.
No, don't feed him, Adele. Don't.
I like that idea. Yes. You know what? You know what? There is an energy that you get from working. I won't say shoulder to shoulder, but in the same physical vicinity with a team of people, and can come together, and one person says something that sparks somebody else's imagination, and there you go. And I think that, especially when you have entry-level people coming into the workforce, it is a better environment for them to learn and grow when they have physical proximity to the people who are mentoring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Stuart.
After you.
Okay.
Right.
I was going to say, I think you're still going to have trainings, right? People, coming together for a training. My team is entirely remote. We get together usually at least once a year. I think that kind of stuff's going to come back. Conferences, we talked about high tech going virtual this year. I don't believe it will be virtual forever. So you're going to have some travel. Will it be back? Will business travel be back to the same level it was in November, December, January? Probably not even in 2021, right? But I think it's coming back. But I don't think it's going to start to really come back till we have a vaccine or till we have something. I mean, you've got, almost 30% of people on the leisure side not willing to travel right now, right? Could not be persuaded to book a trip. To Lauren's point on legalities, I've talked to several business CEOs that are just like, we're not taking the risk. We're not sending people to travel right now. I think once we have a vaccine, once we get this under control, it'll start to come back. So I disagree slightly with you, Ben, but I don't think it's going to come back to where it is today, because you're still going to have needs for travel. You're still going to have needs on the sales side to go meet clients. You're still going to have needs for conferences and that get together. And I'm sorry, I love y'all, but hanging out in person is so much better than the Zooms.
Okay.
Ben, we're ganging up on you now, buddy.
It's not for the first time, buddy. I'm taking bigger fish. So, question, Tris, for yourself. When we ran the digital marketing team at Pegasus for nearly 5 years, how many of our clients did we meet in person to close?
I would say all of them.
What would you really say, Tristan?
Okay, what would I really say? No, I take your point, but we did travel to visit clients on a regular basis, and the amount of times that we came back with more business from those face-to-face visits, because you managed to carve out that, were very, very high. I think we always spoke about this, how the cost of our visit going over the Atlantic, we were net positive coming back on the journey home than we were for the overall cost of the trip.
But for the sales side of things and the getting the clients through the doors, I mean, let's look at the situation we're in now with the new swathe of sales that we're going out for. How many of our clients are we going to meet before signing them?
One. I am going next week. I forgot to tell you about that one. So one, I take your point.
My point being, guys,
we are in the middle of a pandemic.
My point being here is, I think we're going to move on from that. I think when I say business travel, Tammy, what I probably should have said is regular business travel as it was pre-COVID. But that's a bit of a mouthful.
Oh, now you're changing your argument.
No. Okay.
Because the whole time you were down this business travel's not coming. Business travel's never going to exist ever again. No one is ever going to travel any time ever again for business. Not one person is ever going to travel.
Says the man from Papua New Guinea.
But everyone else has been saying, well, some people will travel for some reason. It won't be as high as it was.
So, what I'll do is I'll listen back to the webinar.
Yeah. That's what we all heard.
I definitely.
Lauren will translate in 8 different languages. So
yes, including Papua New Guinea for Stuart and his family.
That's a good tactic, Ben. Right, when you start losing an argument.
New Guinea, and he had to stay there for months and months. There are some things that just have to happen on the site.
I think there's going to be a strata of people. There's going to be those that have to. I mean, even now, even in our logistics with our clients, we don't often have to go see our clients initially. We can do a lot of things remotely before any of this ever happened, until we had to justify a trip to the property to better acclimate and get familiar with literally the culture, the feel, the layout, the vibe. No matter how much you see it on pictures and videos, there's still a different perspective when you're in person walking a hall than you are with a picture. So,
I think it's going to depend on what the reason that you were traveling before. If I look at myself, I do that sample size of one that Ben so adequately did with his analogy there of looking at their business previously. I will definitely travel less for the foreseeable future. I was traveling a couple of times a month. I probably won't travel for business again this year, but next year I'll start to travel again some. I'll probably go to some conferences. I'll probably start going to some pitches, and when someone has a big RFP that it's worth going and shaking hands and it makes sense, I probably will. But I think anyone that thinks we flip the switch and this is going to come back overnight or it's going to come back quickly is deluding themselves and are going to be in trouble. If you've been heavily reliant on business travel previously, you've got to pivot. You've got to find a new opportunity. Whether it comes back 10%, 20%, 50%, 90%, it's going to be lower than it was, in the previous 5 years for the foreseeable future. You've got to figure out.
Taking your example of Tim's example of the betting in the odds. Let's do two contrasts. One, say it turns into vaporware right now. Poof, disappears. The world, just for some magical reason, Trump's right, which would be magical, believe me. So
to
say
be fair, Ben's using Trump's argument method of where he argues a point until he
and then
realizes
changes.
he's
Yeah,
wrong,
he's
and then
doing a
says
little.
everything.
Well,
He never
I
said that.
stand
That's
by.
not what I said.
Stand by what I said, and I'll
That's
say
not what I
again:
said.
business travel is scuppered. Absolutely scuppered. And when you
Scuppered, I have to write that
show notes
down.
for it, I'd like it in bold, please.
So
That is
say
actually
for this, okay. The scar is still there. There's still the apprehension, the reservation, the concern, the damage. And it's going to take whatever time that is, if even that happened. Then there's the what happens if it goes in the opposite, which now we're going into the triad of flu and resurgence and gosh knows what other plague is going to be flying up around here. And now all of a sudden we're facing with multiple issues as to why to continue this reservation of not wanting to go out or to travel or to extend and whatever have you. How does that impact the duration of this? Because really that's the modifier of all this is the persistence of the concern of the reason why we're not traveling anymore. Hey, Miss Lily. So, with that in mind, we, to your point, so we have to have a plan for, not a plan, but plan for both in the sense of if we do have the ability to begin to expand that market, it's still not going to be the same, period, no matter what the prime scenario would be. And the other is that if it has a duration of delay, even more so, that you literally, like when somebody loses one of their senses, the other senses have to get heightened. We're seeing technology being developed now. I mean, now that wasn't in existence even 5 months ago. And I can only imagine that's going to continue to accelerate and expand as we get Zoom fatigue and whatever terms we come up with on this. We might go into 360 videos these days, or we might have, Second Life. Remember the old Second Life platform, which was really dorky, but, who knows? Maybe there's going to be this virtual engagement that we start creating in another virtual world and whatever. Who knows where all is going to come out of this? But the idea is that it's going to have, Ben has an idea.
I don't have an idea. What I do have is a sudden realization that despite our best efforts, we have again snowballed over Melissa, who has not got through.
She got 6 from out. She got 6. I'm trying to keep it all down because I did the under 7. I'm
Just
trying
shut
to keep
myself up. Lauren.
Ben, are you filling in my role for me while I was a little late today?
I'm just trying to be a little bit Lily. That's all.
He's trying to,
Just like 5% Lily.
Lily,
If
he's
we
trying to
all
recover
try to
from
be a
being
little bit
embarrassed a minute ago. He
Oh,
was
yeah, he's trying to-
shamed by everyone on the show. So
No.
he's trying to recover.
I'm 36.
The word for today is
I'm still
scuppy.
yet to be on that. So I'm going to put this back on, Melissa.
Melissa, did we shorten you on any of the other stuff? Please continue forward. Our bad.
All right. Let's talk about fear. Because in the last survey results, the title of my blog post was Fear is Declining. And this blog post, when I put out the results, I nearly called it Forget Everything I've Said Before because of this question. So we asked people to pick the top 3 reasons that would prevent them from traveling to a hotel right now. Since we've asked this question, the 2 top things have been the same: fear of guest interactions, fear of common areas. That hasn't changed. However, since the last survey, fear of guests increased from 41% up to 51%, and common areas increased from 30% up to 41%. Huge jumps in that. On top of that, the percentage of those saying nothing is preventing them, and we had just added that choice as an option on our last survey, that dropped from 33% down to 24%.
You
And
know,
get a load of this. Budget concerns. Budget decreased from the 4th spot all the way down to number 7. That's how not important budget is at this point in time to people. It's all about safety.
I think that a lot of people have fear about the interactions with other people because there's been a lot of publicity about bad interactions and clashes with people when asked to put on a mask. And, we I think a lot of people would like to be able to travel and feel that there is some control. I think we talked about that a little bit last week, but there's a tension on those bad incidents, and there's not a lot of attention on the good incidents. And maybe we as hoteliers need to um, show and demonstrate in videos, and maybe even compile videos about hotels or resorts around the country or travel experiences around the country where everybody's doing the right thing and behaving well. And this could be you. You can come and do this too. Because, if all you know is that a French bus driver was beaten by people for trying to tell them to put on a mask, you're going to say, is that everywhere? Is that going to does that happen every day? It's terrible.
I think you're right, half right, and I agree with everything you said to a point about what we need to do. Right, we definitely need more visibility in modeling responsible travel and proper appropriate behavior, and that will give people a sense of comfort. If they can see other people that look like them doing things, modeling the behavior that we want. I think the root cause of the fear is a little deeper than you think. I don't think it's necessarily about the incidents. I think it's one of the things that's been exacerbated through this whole thing is this tribalism that has already been prevalent in the U.S., but globally as well. It's increased tremendously where there's this them versus us mentality. There's the fear of the others. And you see it everywhere, right? And it's not like a political thing or a race thing. It's just someone that's not me, not in my tribe, has this disease, has this black mark, and I don't want it, right? So we saw it in tourist destinations before they opened, saying we don't want the tourists coming in because they are the ones that have the coronavirus. They're going to bring it to us. Now we got the opposite, where people won't travel to a destination because they're saying the locals, the people in that destination, they have it, or the people from West Virginia traveling to that destination, and I live in Tennessee, they have it and we don't. There's this them versus us rhetoric that's been exacerbated by the mainstream media that's creating that fear, I think. I don't think it's necessarily individual incidents. I think the incidents are a symptom of this tribalism that's happening. So we've got to kind of bring people together.
With clients, I'm asking a very core question to them now as to where do they stand on the enforcement of their guests in following the guidelines, because that is now a dividing point as to the hotel's success. If the staff is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we validate it with videos and everything else we're doing, and hey, look at us, we're walking around with masks, we're wiping stuff down, that's great. But then if you're going to let the people come in and do whatever they're going to want to do and don't give a rat's butt about wearing a mask or touching stuff or sneezing or coughing or screw you, I'm going to do what I want, I'm an American, whatever, I don't want to go there. And so now hotels are faced with the decision of enforcement. I'm sorry, sir, we're not going to let you check in. Well, you're not going to take my money? Yeah, we're not going to, because you're not wearing a mask. And the owner's going to go, wow, wait a minute, I got in. No, you're on one side of that fence or you're on the other side of the fence. You can't kind of be. You can't say this wing is mask only and that wing is mask, who cares? You can't, there's no dividing point. You have to decide which side of the fence you're standing. We're seeing in the retail sector now, large retail, where they just said, you know what, nobody's going to make a rule, so we're going to make our rule. Rule is, you come in our store, you need a mask. And yeah, you're going to see videos where people are going to be like, oh, get out. I'm sorry, private property, bye-bye. Right to serve, right not to serve, you're gone. And we're going to start seeing those lines get more and more firmed up as we realize that it's a business decision. It's a matter of revenue or not. Now, some hotels may never have that option. BFE hotel between point A, point Z in the middle of nowhere, they're going to take whoever walks in the door, probably, just because they have to, because there's very few that are walking by them anyway. But for most hotels that are either destination-based or have that capacity of drawing a line, they're going to have to. They're going to have to make that distinction, I think.
Because if you are on the fence, you will, according to Melissa's statistics, definitely piss off 28% of your guests. Because that are on the definitely yes, definitely no.
Right. Well, you're probably going to piss off 50% because if you're on the fence, right, you're going to say, I'll let the people figure it out. And some people are going to be adamant mask wearers, some are not. They're going to clash and they're going to alienate each other. And none of them are going to be happy, right? But if you pick a side, at least now you've got 75% of people, as long as you're setting clear expectations, I'm very adamant that you should be on the enforcing safety protocols, enforcing mask wearing, regardless of your political opinion or your scientific opinion on how effective masks are. It's better for travel in the hospitality industry at large, in your business in the long term, for you to protect your guests, right? That's the right side to fall on in hospitality. But that means that if the majority of people are going to go that way, which I think they will, there is going to be an opportunity on the other side to be like, screw it, we're going to have, everyone can do whatever they want here. And a certain element will gravitate towards them, but they're going to be scrutinized heavily. They're going to have massive outbreaks, and they're going to lose their long-term business effectiveness. So I really feel like I wish the big organizations, the HSMEIs, the HLAs, the AHOAs, were really taking a stand on this and saying, hospitality, we need to get behind safety. And the biggest thing right now is let's have people visit responsibly, wear a mask, socially distance, and let's set expectations. Here's a playbook. Here's how you communicate to the guests so you don't have those ugly scenes at check-in. Every guest walking in knows what the expectations are before they arrive. If you do it the right way, you avoid confrontation. You piss some people off, but you save the industry.
It's kind of like,
we're in an existential battle right now.
It's kind of like the police saying a stop sign is a slow to optional pace. Maybe if you want to, if nobody's there, go through it anyway. That's what we're facing right now, is this ambiguity as to enforcement. And to your point, Stuart, nobody's stopping them saying, hey, stop sign means stop, okay? What does it mean? You stop. I don't care if there's any other car in the inventory that you can't see for miles. That sign means you stop where you're at and follow the rule. That makes a society work. We all agree on the same terms. Where there's the frustration point out of this, where it's like, the reason why we drive on one side of the road versus another. Obviously, England has it wrong. We have it right. The whole,
Yeah.
Deep breath.
And the bad behavior in Florida not only hurts the travel business in Florida, but it hurts the travel business in New York, because we don't get to have the people from Florida come visit. And it also hurts the people in the Aria Hotel Budapest, because they don't get to get Americans to come visit, because nobody wants, germy Americans to come.
I think the closest comparison that we can really make here is, in terms of the ambiguity, is smoking. Remember when we had smoking and non-smoking sections in a restaurant? If you sat in the non-smoking section, were you affected?
You bet.
Oh, yeah.
Because smoke did not pay attention to whether or not it was supposed to be on this side or that side. So it's kind of the same thing. And I mean, even in hotels where you've got your own personal room, there were hotels that would have smoking and non-smoking rooms. And still, as a guest, I didn't want to stay there being a non-smoker, because I would walk through the hallways and smell cigarette smoke everywhere I went, no matter what. So it's like that. It really permeates everything. You can't do partial here and partial there. You have to go both ways. And while I agree with Stuart, I mean, somebody could look at this data and statistically say, because you've done this nice breakdown of whether or not the reported increase is going to impact your vacation plans, and then those who want to wear masks and those who don't want to wear masks. So those who want to not have masks mandated are actually less likely to cancel their trips in the case of a spike. So technically, the data could support a don't mandate masks if you're just desperate for last minute business, but you're also then dealing with very short-sighted.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're losing all of the business past 90 days. So that, I think, is really the line in the sand that people need to choose.
And it's like an early bird special. Once you start it, you can't stop it. So when you did that, it's going to be really hard to get off of that train.
Do you want to be known as the angry, rebellious hotel for the rest of your life, or the hotel where people can come relax?
And the hotel where your employees got sick.
Right.
God
Yeah.
forbid
There's
anything
that whole
happens
legality
to
thing
your
again.
employees.
What are you exposing your employees to if you're not mandating that for your guests?
Opening up a whole
Emma keeps throwing out some cool stuff, by the way, in the chat for people, just so you know. She's throwing out some neat stuff. We're just not talking about it, which is weird.
I designate Tammy as the official secretary of the lounge.
When I refer to the road driving situation, we drive on the right side, and the opposite of right is what? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, wrong. Yeah, okay, so
I'm pretty sure we established left side before America decided.
Oh no!
to be
Don't you start giving
contrarian.
it we, Stuart. Now, don't start giving it we.
Stuart,
You're not one of us. You're one of them. You talk about us and them.
This is the tribalism I was talking about. Right here.
this is the secret reason behind the revolution. It wasn't about tea. It was
Wasn't
about
about tea.
which side of the road we wanted
Yeah,
to
which
drive
side of the
on.
road do you run on?
Never
You know,
mind that there weren't cars.
and whether you
at
get
that
scuppered or not. You know, if you get scuppered, you're out.
It's done, mate.
I learned what donkey years was. What was that? A week ago, Stuart?
Oh yeah, throughout donkey's years. She's like, is that like dog years? I'm like, no, it just means a very long time.
That's funny. I mean, every now and again, I'm reminded of the differences in language. Like
It's massive.
I told one of my team I had a dicky tummy once, and they laughed for about 40 minutes. And I was like, guys, it does not mean what I think you think it means.
Yeah.
It means I'm a little under the weather.
Okay, I'm glad you explained that because I'm thinking what you think it means.
If you say you got like oh man, this is probably the furthest we've ever strayed from hospitality on this show. But if we've taken some tangents.
Yeah.
Like if you say you have a dicky elbow, it means you have like a sore elbow or an upset tummy or like your body part hurts. Like, oh, I've got a dicky leg. It means my leg aches.
Yeah.
But I
Not
said
like really bad. It's like a little.
yeah, it's like more of like an inconvenience.
Yeah.
But I told it to my team. And I just lost the meeting. I was like, right, okay, we'll just pick this up tomorrow, guys. We ended up actually having a shared Google Doc, which is a translation doc of what we said and what we meant.
You know, that might be something that you want to publish as a service, Ben. For
Yeah, please do.
Translations of conversations when speaking with somebody from the island.
so, Melissa,
Yes, I have. This is one stat that just blew my mind. Still on the same question. This has my head spinning so fast I cannot put it back together. So, breaking down the masks versus non-mask people. Those who prefer a mask voted 65% fear of other guests. Makes total sense. Makes a lot of sense. They would have more fear. But 43% of those preferring no masks still had fear of other guests. How can you not want a mask and say that fear of guests is your top concern?
Because they're more scared of the masks than they are of people.
Don't apply.
well, you know, people are a little bit, you know, veering way off. First of all, anytime we're under this much stress, there's going to be a lot of irrationality, conflicting emotions that are coming in. What they're really saying is they don't want to have to wear a mask. What they want the requirement everyone should wear a mask but me.
Right.
That they don't want the inconvenience. And so, you know, anytime we see this kind of irrationality and mixed messages come in, it just causes that type of division. It's the natural fight or flight response that people are having right now. And that's everybody's living out of that sort of amygdala lizard brain kind of area where everything is about safety. And some people translate forced to wear masks as not safe. Because
I don't know if you remember an old movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. My wife refers to it quite regularly when it comes to this, that the gods must be crazy. There are a couple of possible positives, as horrid as all this is, for people that have suffered through it and have lost from it and everything else. I'm not trying to take anything away from that, but the idea of this community, or that we're part of a community, is being reemphasized perpetually in our day-to-day lives. You know, hey, look, we're doing this for the benefit of everyone, not just ourselves, whether we're sick or not. This is something smarter to do. Also, too, we have as a culture over the past few years have created this, self-centric world. We, as you say, self-entitled, everybody else should be doing what needs to be done to protect me. I don't have to do that for them. And possibly based on the duration of what we're going to go through in this, example of how we relax the rules and look what happened, kind of mentality, that we might begin to get that uncommon common sense back into some of our dialogue of people that go, hey, you know what? I'm not sick, but maybe wearing a mask does help somebody that they don't. Then maybe somewhere along this, there will be somebody that begins to really realize. I mean, you see this in examples they throw out into the news media already. People that are like, this is hoax, this and this, and all of a sudden somebody in their family, it hits them, and then poof, oh, wait a minute, whoa, this is real. Maybe not enough of that, and I'm certainly not wishing ill on anybody for that to be the exposure value, but maybe the realization that it has a tangible reality to it and not just a fictional, whatever the terminology, fake news or, public or, whatever they say it is, that there is a reality to all this. That's why we're doing what we're doing to prevent it from spreading.
Bless your heart, Lauren. You live in some kind of utopian la la land. I think.
Don't you feel better, warm and fuzzy? Want some hot chocolate now? Come on.
I wish that were the case, but I don't see any evidence that that is the case. In fact, I see it going the opposite way.
Come on. Unicorns and rainbows.
More separated, more tribal.
Yeah, I think there's always this initial push, right? All of a sudden, crisis, come together,
Mm-hmm.
and then it starts to dissipate over time, right? Because nobody's psyche is built to withstand this kind of stress for 4 months without a break.
Yeah.
Nobody's psyche is built to do that. And so unless people are doing like deep emotional therapeutic work right now, or have, really good tools already in place to take care of it.
Or alcohol.
Well, yeah, on a side note, that does remind me, I was talking with somebody from Stuart's home country of South Africa. And anyway, a hotelier in South Africa, and they have mandated no sales of alcohol. Not just restaurants and bars are closed. Nobody is allowed to purchase alcohol at all as part of their coronavirus restrictions to stem the flow. And I was like, well, are they worried people are just going to get drunk and like cough on each other? And he said, no, the hospitals need room for COVID patients. And there were too many patients coming in from car crashes and other things that you might not think are related, but are tying back to the use of alcohol. So they're making everybody be sober. And they actually, although I don't see the tie-in for this one necessarily, they also outlawed the sale of cigarettes in March. So can you imagine what would happen in America if we took away cigarettes and alcohol?
I don't see that happening.
That's right.
Talking about riots. Yeah, that's riots.
Didn't we try to take away alcohol? Wasn't that prohibition?
We just closed the bars and restaurants. Yeah, I don't think we actually closed the sale of alcohol other than, if grocery stores were closed.
Yeah.
We can, it has been amazing how open we've been with alcohol in New York anyway. People are having cocktails in the middle of Bryant Park. They're getting to go from restaurants. They pick up their restaurant order and they have a margarita to go with it, or a pitcher of sangria and everything. That has never been allowed before.
Wow.
Yep.
So everybody, I think it keeps everybody more.
Anybody else getting AA messages from their alcohol distributor when they get delivered on the pallet of alcohol? Anybody else getting notes saying you should check these guys out? Anybody? No.
No. But Lily has a great point, right? The stress levels that we're under is almost unprecedented. I mean, it's happened before during world wars, but very, very few, and no one's really studied it. But if you look at things like alcoholism rates, suicide rates, there's a lot of even heart disease and heart attack rates. Everything is going through the roof this year, and it's not something that people are really talking about. But it's there's all symptomatic of what Lily's talking about, which is we aren't emotionally sophisticated enough in general. Most of us are not. I certainly am not, to really understand what is going on, why our brains are reacting the way it is, and why we're having this emotional reaction to something like face mask, which on the surface seems very logical. And to people that are on one side of that argument, they're like, I don't get it. I fundamentally don't understand the other side. And the other side's like, I fundamentally don't understand why they don't understand me. And it's emotional, very like deep level thing that humans aren't really capable of discerning without some deep psychological like some kind of intervention from a professional that can really unpack it and explain it to people. So to solve that problem, to solve the fact that we're all pent up, travel is a great solution, right? Travel is something that frees the spirit. And so we need to look at opportunities to turn this conversation around from travel is dangerous to travel can save us. Travel is something that, hey, you're working from home. You can work from the balcony of our hotel. Your family is out of school. The kids can play in a pool while you're still working from home. And it's cheaper than it's ever been, and you'll have experiences better. This is a conversation that we as an industry need to try to embrace and try to catalyze in the mainstream culture. And it's just not, I'm not seeing it happen.
Just, on a side note of something, and I don't know if it means this or whether I'm just implying that it does or not. I have a lot of older friends that are retired here in the community that are dear friends of ours, and at their age, which is just slightly beyond mine, so I'm right close to being what they're thinking of. They're running out of time. Their retirement was based on what they were going to do in retirement. They were going to travel. They have the RV. They have the boats. They do the things, and that's been taken away. And they're sitting at home, and the family can't visit, and or if they do, that it's a commitment of 14 days plus, and everything else, and all this criteria associated with it. And the frustration that they have is that they have a finite amount of time left. I mean, you begin to mentally calculate how long you're going to be around on the planet, at your age level. And for them, I see that as probably the highest pent up opportunity because they have the finances to do that. They certainly have the motivation to do that, but they also have the highest risk on it. So they're the least of they're the last troops to go out afterwards, so to speak. They're the ones that have to ensure that what they do is the safest that they can do it because they're at the highest level of risk opportunity for it. And so, you have that there. As we progress forward in this timeline, whatever this, the duration of this is, there is going to be a point where that gate's going to get open for them, where they're going to be feeling at that level that they're going to do that. And knowing that in your market mentality of saying, there will be this point of this whole surgence of people wanting to do things will be out there. And the other one that I've had a lot of thought about is a special needs traveler that we really don't talk enough about. All of this education process of what our availabilities are, what our restrictions are. You start dealing with a special needs traveler that has visual impairment, hearing impairment, physicality impairment, whatever it is. Are we communicating at a level sufficient for them to understand what we're doing or what needs to be done if they have to travel, what it means when they come to us? Are we covering those bases with them? Because we can't throw Braille out. We can't send out Braille, but they have to find some means of communication with them. Is our sites doing what their job is supposed to do? Is even our Google My Business doing what it's supposed to do with the accurate information on it? These are the key elements to make sure that we're not isolating them even to a worse environment where they're basic prisoners because of inefficiency of communication on our part. So again, it's one of my little
So
wow.
I want to take what you said and take it in a slightly different direction because I think you're touching on a really big opportunity for hoteliers and hotel marketers right now, right? So people with disabilities, with special needs, they have communities, and they're very tight knit communities. In word of mouth is always the best form of advertising, right? So if you're someone that is sitting there scratching your head saying, all right, I don't have business travel, I don't have group travel anytime soon, and I'm looking for new opportunities to target new audiences, try to figure out how can you cater to specific groups of people. Maybe it's, you become an autism-friendly establishment by training your staff and getting certified and putting in facilities that are going to be catered to folks that have autism. Or maybe it's visually impaired, or maybe it's other disabilities. But figure out something that you care about deeply, that you're passionate about, that you can provide for, and then go hard, lean into that. Like, have that be a differentiator. Because one of the things, our hometown, Mona Beach, in some of the local cities, municipalities like Surfside Beach, became an autism-friendly designated destination. It was an independent verified. And we started seeing these communities showing up. And not only were they showing up, but they were really appreciative that people were really taking care of them. And then they spread that like wildfire within their community, which is tight-knit. And it was a flywheel effect. You started seeing more people come in, and then they spread it to more people, and then they spread it to more people. So this is how granular and surgical you have to start thinking with marketing. We can't just turn on our campaigns and say, we'll grab the demand that's there, because the demand isn't there. And there's more supply than there is demand right now. So you've got to go out and find and create demand. I think one of the opportunities there is for targeting folks with special needs. And it doesn't have
Completely agree.
Any kind of special needs.
Especially when you deal with things like, for those that need refrigeration for diabetes medication, for those that need special rooms because of assistance or first floor levels. And, how do you convince you need to convince and let people understand that you are wearing masks, you are creating protocols, you are doing cleanliness. Yeah. I told you about a really cool app that was developed by IBM where it's somebody's on call that if somebody with visual impairment, for instance, is trying to look at something, they literally can hit a button on their phone, this app, and it'll pop up and whoever's available takes it. And the visually impaired person is pointing it towards someone saying, what am I looking at? Or what is this? And the person on the phone will go over and say, you're looking at a doorway that has, 2 stairs before it or whatever. And just that immediate help that kind of like immediate help. And I'm thinking, how can that get translated to a hotel? Can we tell people, like, if you come to the hotel, we're going to give you a direct link to us at the front desk, that if you're wanting to look, so you don't understand what you're looking at, or you're at a place you don't know, or you're disoriented or whatever, that you can do this, and we're going to be able to look through your phone and say, oh, you're on the second floor by the stairwell, you need to turn around and go 2 doors back, whatever. I mean, like I said, we're in a new world right now. This is some cool things to think about. Like, is there ways to do that? Because these,
Right, but
you think about all
it
these
shouldn't take
people
a
that have
pandemic
this stuff.
to get us thinking like this. It shouldn't take the pandemic to get us trying to be more
No,
inclusive.
I agree.
But I mean, over the last few years, it became vogue, didn't it, for hotels to now give you a phone in your room. Oh, take this phone and use it to explore New York, or they use it to call numbers. I've got my own phone, dude. I don't need to carry another phone around. But that could be a really inclusive and useful app. I'm not. I wish Tris was here. I wish he had to drop off for a sales call abruptly, but he can speak about on a personal level how family members with disabilities, and I don't know whether or not he'd be. I don't know whether or not he'd agree that in every instance people with disabilities have communities that they're members of. I think in some instances, certain levels of disability can leave people ostracized and more difficult to connect with. And I know certainly in the case that I'm thinking about, that obviously have to be respectful to Tris's privacy here. I think the situation that he's in, I think going to a hotel and exposing a family member to even an increment more risk through COVID just isn't something that he'd entertain. And I think that would be the same for a lot of people, particularly parents. But I'm not trying to poo-poo the idea of going into and being smart, not exploitative, but sort of nicely exploitative, of going for sort of the underrepresented guests. I think that's still a great idea, but I think you'd have to be sensitive as to how you did it, and recognize that not everyone is going to want to take that risk in those kind of groups.
Well, to Stuart's point, I mean, right now we see the same thing we hear in all these webinars, we hear in all these reports that people are just splurting out everywhere. Transient's the only thing. Drive markets. I mean, so basically, if you're in a hunting group, it's like, okay, there's a bunch of deer. The only thing we can hunt is deer. So everybody's running off with deer, and you're going, hey, look at these squirrel over here. It's like, wait a minute, there's other stuff. And because everybody's going after the same market, the only differentiation we have in our own markets right now are those that are actually doing it, and those that don't even have a clue, or not doing it, or have the capacity, like brand hotels with their hands tied, their legs tied, they're blindfolded. They can't do half of what they need to do for themselves because they don't have the support from the brand to actually get it done. So that's the 3 conditions you have: people that actually know what they're hunting for, those that aren't even figuring out it yet, and those that can't do it.
I mean, as long as you're hunting transient deer, because there's going to be no business deer around to hunt. So.
Yeah, but then you look at Airbnb, which I was completely wrong on. I mentioned this weeks ago, where I thought Airbnb was going to be like, withered up, dried, can't get anything. They have it all blocked on the municipal level, and here they are, the golden child of travel right now. Even from the survey you just said, with the vacation travel being it's a high in interest from the numbers you have.
It's not wanting to skip ahead into this sentiment study, but it's really interesting talking about or looking at pricing. Budget concerns. Pick the top 3 reasons that would prevent you from staying at a hotel right now. Budget concerns, towards the bottom third of that, a little over 20%. In the UK, our Chancellor of the Exchequer announced a reduction in VAT, essentially sales tax, from 20% down to 5% across hospitality. So where you would pay 20% sales, because we do it differently. Our price is our price. Like, I've never got the American thing, like, oh, this costs $4. You get to the cashier's desk. It's actually you didn't factor this raft of taxes that we're going to charge you now. Whereas in the UK, if something costs £4, I know it costs £4, and because all the taxes are built in. But our Chancellor has slashed the sales tax from 20 to 5 across hotels, restaurants, pubs. There's basically £10 off main courses, 50% off this, that, and the other, to try and kickstart the economy and kickstart that part of the industry. But if budget concerns is so far down what people are actually looking for, maybe it's barking up the wrong tree. Again, probably an English phrase, meaning maybe he's not focusing in the right place. just so I can.
I don't know. I think barking up the wrong tree is more of a
Yeah,
universal.
that's universal.
That's
Yeah.
unilateral.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
I think
making sure.
that's a safe one. You
Just
know,
making sure.
They have dogs over here. Yeah.
We don't have donkeys.
Apparently not dogs.
Only at the Grand Canyon.
Anyway, guys, apologies. I'm going to have to run. I've got another call to jump on. Thank you for another fantastic Friday. I always enjoy these. It really are the highlights of my week. Arguing with Ed, and who's not here, who's here, but not actually going to be here before.
yeah,
I leave.
he didn't show up to
No, he's here. He's in. He's just basically creeping.
Yes.
Oh,
totally.
is he? Yeah, is he just died?
Nothing new there.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah,
But no.
Ben, hey, listen, thanks for making it in.
Pleasure, guys.
And then also say thanks to Tris as well. Be good to see you guys again as always. And
Yep.
if they want to know about 3 and 6,
Yep, 360 agency, digital without dishonesty. Not that I'm suggesting other digital agencies are dishonest, but some of them are.
no,
None of this call.
that's just crazy talk.
Not perish the thought of anybody on this call at all. Thank you very much,
And now,
guys.
now that everything's virtual,
Bye,
Ben,
Ben.
I'm happy about the fact that as I talk to new client potentials, you know, like, hey, this is what I do, so forth, they're going to look over my shoulder and go, hey, he was a good-looking guy, Ben.
I'll send you a signed photo. You can
Would
see.
you please? Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend,
Bye,
everybody.
Ben.
Bye-bye.
Hey, man.
So how did we
Alright.
get so far, Melissa? Did we break my 7? We did. We had 8 so far. Dang it. I
We're up
lost
to
count.
8. We're up to 8. And I do want to
You
say,
guys already covered number 10.
no,
I want to make sure we get to that one.
yes, but I do want to talk about 8 for a minute because, again, just some drastic shifts in this question that we have asked on every single survey. So that's talking about what people want to hear from hotels during the virus and what the property is doing to protect guests, still number 1. But what has moved into the number 2 spot is how the virus is affecting the local area. So basically saying, if I actually go, what the heck am I going to be able to do when I get there?
Yeah, I actually just traveled to California over this past weekend, which, you know, we're buddies, Arizona and California. We let each other in because we're doing so poorly on both ends. It doesn't really matter one way or the other. But I traveled to California and it was kind of surprising to me. I know that I can find information on where I'm restricted to travel to New York and New Jersey, but at this point, people are only putting out if there's an exception. But right now, with everything being the exception, I would have felt a lot better going into my trip had I been able to find a list easily that said California is currently accepting travelers from the following states, because it didn't say they weren't, but as quickly as things are changing, that would have added a lot of peace of mind for me, like even that, hey, you can come here. And so I think that's kind of something interesting to explore as well in the way that we're messaging out, like what is possible, not just where there are restrictions, because for all I know, those just haven't been updated yet. And in theory, that could go the same way the other way around. But in my brain, I feel more confident that, you know, I'll be fine if it says I could come.
I think we're an all-inclusive state. I don't think we've limited anybody.
I know that from organic social posting, and then we boosted some of these or did them as ads, actually. We've been identifying, I've had a client in Indianapolis in particular, go out and keep in contact with all of the local restaurants for 2 reasons. 1, to see what incentives we can create in collaboration. 2, to share what they're doing from a meal period point of view. What are they serving by meal periods? How are they serving it? What restrictions do they have for seating versus do they deliver? Do they pick up? Do they bring it to the restaurant or where you have to pick up? All these things, hours of operations, menu restrictions, if there's limited menu, full menu, is there coupons? All this information we're posting regularly on social for them, so that in the process of discovery and in the process of seeing our videos saying, here's our new protocols. When you walk in, this is what we do. This is where you ask you to stand. We're also having videos and content of postings talking about this stuff in a way of, like we keep talking about, or I keep blabbering about anyway, about this constant transparent communication. This is what to expect when you're with us. This is what's open. And we've now just started in the 3rd phase of this, adding what's actually open. Like, okay, zoo's open, but unless you're a member, you can't get in. So don't plan on going to the zoo. And then over here, the Child's Museum, you have to have reservations. So before you make sure you're here, just like a spa used to be, Make sure you have your reservation set so that when you get here, you know that you're able to get to the children's museum, because without it, you're not going to be able to get in. You just can't show up. So we're trying to communicate those things now as a third level of dialogue with them, so that they can not only know what we're doing, what we have available, what our protocols are, but also what's around, what's available to them, what they should be considered, to know that they can get to, even if it's Cracker Barrel or KFC. All of that's included. And then the third is what is actually happening around us that they can still contribute to. So.
Yeah. Lauren, what are you doing to make sure that as things change? Like, let me give you a prime example. On Monday, Santa Clara County, where I lived, opened up gyms, except you couldn't do anything that was cardio. So no treadmills, no like rowers or exercise bikes, but the gyms opened up, hairdressers, oh, thank God, salons. Oh, and then the governor Monday afternoon said, nope, anybody on the watch list, and we weren't, but we were as of Wednesday. So literally my hair salon was open for 2 days. The nail, so and then had to shut down. And in addition, so I have a mall that I can walk to. It's a good 25-30 minute walk, but that I can walk to from my house, one of the biggest malls up here in the Bay Area. And they were open and they've had to shut down. In fact, I got some communication from them that 80 stores now have curbside pickup because the malls shut back down. So, you went in on Sunday or Monday and you're posting about this, and now you're having to change it. How are we changing in a way that, and I'm asking the question, right? I mean, we're doing the same thing. You're constantly updating your website, but how do you make sure that the guests are getting accurate information that's up to date, right? That's, and I mean, I know some of the things we're doing too, but kind of curious from your.
Yeah, no, we actually have, we pre-planned this, and we actually have, and I'm not trying to be coy about this, we actually have 3 responses to that. One is the people that haven't engaged with us, that haven't made a reservation or anything, so we don't have a direct communication capability with them. 2, that we actually have a reservation with. And the third is we're trying to introduce SMS messaging through ManyChat on our Facebook, which allows them to communicate with us, and we communicate with people via level 1, level 2 dialogue on Facebook, so that they have an open channel with us regardless. That's a slow process because it's been just started, so we don't know how effective it's right now. We're getting people signed up and things, but that's about it. But when it comes to the property is responsible. First off, the property's engagement locally is responsible, and they've created a community out of this. The restaurants are calling them with any changes to their menu, calling them with any changes to their hours. Now, we haven't experienced anything that got shut down immediately, but should that be the case, we discussed, first we would do the reservations that are coming in. We'd send them a notification via email that this has changed. If you were planning this, you need to consider that if you need to cancel because of what we understand, we'll cancel for you, whatever, but this has changed. And that hasn't happened to us yet, but that's how we'd handle that. For our general communication, should it change, we would make that immediate announcement, because we feel comfortable that the dialogue we have with everybody, they're going to tell us like, hey, I just got shut down. I can't, and so we go and literally post saying, guys, we just found out that, Judy's hair salon shut down because of the rules that changed. So, we make that announcement to it. So we figure we have it kind of covered. I'm sure always something can fall through the crack, but we figured we have the direct response, the general response, and then the continued conversation if people engage with us at that level. So.
And that's awesome. And I think that's an important note for everybody that's listening to us, right? There's the communication that you throw out on your website or you just kind of to the world, but you also need to be communicating to those guests that have booked their reservations as things change, and, and especially major changes to what they expect. Florida Beach is closing for 4th of July and all of those kinds of things, to make sure that our consumers that are coming to stay with us understand and have the right level set expectation, because that's, I think, going to help travel overall as well, right? The more we can communicate the good things and what they can do and what's happening in local, and even as things change and as restrictions start to come in place, the more we can communicate to our guests, the better off we're all going to be in the long run.
And it's important to communicate that this is what we have right now, and that the government can change it at any time.
Yeah. Well, we had one false start where they were thinking about opening up the pools. The pools right now in the hotels are closed. In Indianapolis in particular. And there was a rumor that they were going to ease that up. So we got a lot of people calling saying, hey, is your pool open? And we had not only told them on the phone, no, but we also posted again, hey guys, there's been some dialogue that there was some possibility of our pool opening. Right now, there's been no official change yet. So if that is influencing your travel decisions, right now, we can't change our status. Right now, our pool is still closed.
So what are they going to get on board, these brands, and allow their hotels to communicate stuff like this in advance to their travelers?
I think it's funny.
I
You're
understand.
such a disservice. I mean, that is such a disincentive
Right.
from.
Like maybe you don't want to mandate it that you have to send it out because the ability to control that would be next to impossible, but to actually restrict you from sharing key travel advisories with your guests, that's never been the case before. I mean, if you were doing a renovation or something, you put an advisory out to your guests. So I don't know why it's different now, unless the brands are just living in fear of losing that money off of the bottom line.
Well, the 5 people that probably were in charge of dealing with that for each of the individual brands within the brands, so that the 400 people that were probably had something to do with that probably aren't there right now. You know, so these brands are just, I mean, they're stripped, they're derelict. They don't have people doing their jobs.
Where's Stephanie when you need her?
Yeah, right. Yeah, where's Steph?
She's filling in the gaps of what's missing.
Every hotel should have their own website where they can communicate everything very richly and expressively to do the best job with connecting the guests or the prospective guests with the experience that they're going to have on site. And it's just it's already sad enough that we can't get OTAs to be as expressive as we are individually. But to have your own brand, shackle you with limited information, it's just asking for a lower satisfaction level, a lower guest experience, a lower level of communication.
This will probably be one of the studies, however time from now, years, months, whatever from now, as to how this impacted brand relationships, the future of brand, the value of brand, and also a lot of other studies that have come out of this as to social behavior variances and everything else. Of course, we know this is going to be a source of topic for many years to come. But where brands, when they really get granular as to what they did and didn't do, how they responded and came out of this or not, it's going to be an interesting study. I think that there is going to be, me personally, I feel as an opinion that there is going to be a fallout of loyalty from brands, the frustration, especially as we get more of an obituary list of lost businesses. It's no longer about reemergence, resurgence, reopening, pre-opening, all those fun things we were just talking about. Now it's about who isn't opening. Right now, and this is in Florida, I don't know whether you saw the same stat that pop up, but right now, 44% of restaurants currently closed are permanently closed, restaurants and bars. 44% that are currently closed, and this includes bars, are permanently closed. We lost almost half of our restaurant bar businesses in Florida right now, almost. Wow. And whether that stays that way, of course, there'll be rebuilding, there'll be repurchasing, acquisitions, people restarts. There's still percentages to that, but that's like nuclear bomb level stuff. That destroys economies because of so many people that work within that industry base. So I can only imagine what this means for branded hotels that can't reopen. Their hands were tied. They couldn't market themselves. They had no methodology of getting business for whatever business came into market. And they just sat there and watched it dwindle away. And unfortunately, because of other hotels that were able to do something for themselves and literally steal their business.
Yeah, and we're seeing that in the data. The occupancy levels of independent hotels, at least in the markets we're in, independent hotels are way outperforming brands right now, just in terms of recovery.
Which in the world that now we know pandemics really can happen, right? Because I think that was always a question. But in a world where pandemics can happen and what that can look like, that's going to make the decision of whether or not you fly an independent flag or go brand. It's going to make it tough because you can look at who did what and what was available and what ability did I have as a business owner to control my own destiny.
But we're going to have to see fundamental reform in the way financial institutions look at the investment, right? Because right up until now, the big argument towards brands has always been you can't get financing on an independent hotel unless you have crazy capital, right? Or some kind of asset to borrow against. But it's a less risky venture for a bank to invest in a flag because there's almost guaranteed some level of success because the flag's there to support it. So when the analysis is complete after COVID, and if we in this new world where there's more of a guarantee from independents, are the banks going to be sophisticated enough to reevaluate their position and be willing to give financing for
Smart ones will.
to be independent?
Yeah.
But not the majority, right? Probably not the majority.
I think from all of us on this, for all that we represent, I think we're in, not to say the catbird seat, but we're in a very positive position to be a value asset to future investment people. Because I think part of the criteria that will be adapted to is when they look at a brand, brand for financial consideration, they're looking at what the brand brings to that property's value proposition for future business, and that comes to the components of what brand offers in their services, their brand equity, their brand exposure, all the things that brand brings to it. Well, we're a representation of those facets. And because of that, if an independent and a smart bank get together and they say, okay, you have this brilliant independent hotel idea, what is your support system? What is your resources for success? And part of that is going to be a discussion of having people like us or our organizations like us in a position that is, I have the number one, number two, number three, or this agency that does this, this, and this, or this consultancy that does this, this, and this, to do these things that I need to be successful. And this is the track records that we can produce by this.
But let's be honest, it's not even the value that the brand brings, it's numbers. And they have a big sampling that the average brand X hotel performs within this very thin band of performance. The floor is, there, it's much higher than an independent's floor, but the ceiling is much lower than an independent ceiling. And when you look at a 30, 40-year investment, a narrow band is worth lowering that ceiling because you're
a lot less risk.
Yeah,
they make investments on risk. That's it, and they're going to do anything they can do to mitigate risk. That they're more likely to invest.
Yep, and a smart bank, and a smart potential request for investment. Someone's going to show the negative impact of what's happened through this process from brand's perspective. That the numbers that you just talked about, Ed, are unsubstantiated in current circumstance. That they did not fulfill their judiciary responsibility.
Yeah, actually, the floor of a brand is much lower now.
You're going to do this case study and showing, that was possible back then, but given the variabilities of what we just went through and the possibilities of it coming back in some other form, we can show a broader opportunity without a brand's contribution and financial commitment than we can with it. And we have now a true case study that we can point to and say, look at how bad that worked out for those guys.
And you get to keep your money. You don't have to share your money.
Exactly.
That's the best point.
Do you guys think there's going to be lawsuits from franchise holders saying that the flag is not performing according to their contract?
Yes, and actually, I think because if you're a long-time franchise, a multi-franchise of a brand, a lot of your brand agreements have performance guarantees that allow you to just get out without a lawsuit.
Right.
And so, that's where I think a lot of the industry turmoil is going to be seen, is the fallout of a publicly traded brand having to talk about losing chunks of their key count. Because that's what they're judged on, right? Yeah.
However, like from the research project that we're engaged in right now, where we've talked anecdotally with about 200 different hoteliers at this stage over the past month and a half, and the branded limited service properties and extended stay properties are only second to kind of higher end luxury full of activities in terms of those that are having the most consistent results, because the expense burden is less, plus guests are still, because we know, right? Like we're sitting here saying, why aren't you communicating? Somebody who's always stayed at a Hampton Inn or a Courtyard or a Fairfield Inn, they're not going to know the difference. They might, kind of back of their head wish that they could, but they're not sitting here with a bunch of hospitality pros thinking like, wow, I wish that my brand would do a better job of communication necessarily. So they're probably not going to see the fallout on the limited service, select service, and extended stay. I think if anything, it'll be more on the full service hotels, and
which
then what
again,
they do with that.
from a key count, the brands have far more select service, limited service keys than they do large box keys. However, the revenue production of some of these single large box, like, I know one of the big brands, there's 2 properties in their portfolio that make up as much EBITDA in a year as their entire select service collection.
Hey, Tammy has to jump. She said as soon as Ed showed up, I had to leave. I don't know what
Yep.
that was about.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I didn't say it, but it's like,
It's nice. It's nice.
We all
Tammy,
feel
if
that
they want
way.
to find you, where can they find you? And what about Milestone, real quick?
I'm at milestoneinternet.com, and we are a digital agency and a software MarTech provider. So it's been fun, as always, hanging out with you guys. Really bummed that I'm not going to listen to the answer for 10, so I will come back and listen to the recording, because how soon, I'm very curious as to everyone's thoughts on that, but unfortunately I do have to go. So I will see you guys next week. Thank you so
Wishing
much.
you a happy birthday from us. Little bit.
That's right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Tammy.
Nobody
Sorry,
even brought a cake.
So, I don't think the select service is where the bloodletting is going to be. The where the brands are going to hurt, and it's going to be Hyatt, Marriott, and Hilton, are these big box properties that are EBITDA drivers, are big money drivers, not opening or permanently closing. I mean,
Or we're big money drivers.
yeah, you think about what it takes to fill one of these giant hotels like the Hyatt near the Orlando Convention Center. It takes a massive convention to fill that hotel. That's not going to be here for a while. And that hotel is sitting on a substantial amount of debt. So what's going to happen to that hotel ultimately? And what's that going to mean to a Hyatt? Because is it going to stay a Hyatt? Or is that going to, completely change to something else? And then what kind of loss is that for Hyatt in their annual revenue? Think about the Marriott World Center. Think about all the Gaylord properties that they have. These are properties that require massive meetings to be happening to operate at any form of occupancy that would, cover expenses. And it's going to be a long time before that. So what is the cost of having all of your biggest, most profitable properties offline for what could potentially be another year and a half?
Mhm.
It's going to be interesting. And I think it's going to get real interesting around January's earnings reports, when Hilton, Marriott, have to report earnings and have to talk about what's the state of some of these big revenue driving properties.
And at what point are they already losing the money either way? Whether or not that hotel stays a Marriott, if they stay closed, or if they try to reopen but they're living on 10% occupancy and no group, it's still going to probably have essentially a similar impact to the brand one way or the other. So it would actually probably be in their best interest to get that off their balance sheet.
Well, don't forget, they don't own any of these properties.
True.
But they make a ton of money in their cut off of these properties.
And I guess I don't mean balance sheet as much as I mean scorecard.
Yeah.
Right. So like if you're in college, right, and you're getting an F in one class but all A's in the other, you might drop that class to bring up your GPA.
Yeah,
and
but
I think it's kind of the same idea here.
Unlike college, if Marriott decides to walk away from the Marriott World Center in Orlando, they may never get a property like that to fly their flag again, because there's not going to be another one built. Because, oh, by the way, right down the street from the Marriott World Center is the Gaylord and Disney And so there's already, so if they lose that due to the property turning over and someone reflagging it, and that gets reflagged as a Hilton, that's a battleground lost.
Yeah, you could see them throwing it to Autograph, burying it off of the brand ledger sheet to keep Lily's analogy going with that. But the other two is I think we're not also including the double whammy impact of one, the potential loss of keys, guaranteed for certain. Second is the latency development of FF&E rebuilds because they've suspended all of that. Who knows how long they're going to have to suspend on that based on the economies of scale as to, here you have an ownership group that has hotels. They were allowed temporary pause on their FF&E rebuilds for so forth. And now they're being enforced in a too short period with too low of an income to now be doing the new updates. It's like, no, we don't have enough money flow, cash flow to be doing this. So now all of a sudden you get into the terrible world of what IHG had to go through 10 years ago, which was a whole lot of inventory that isn't up to brand standard out in market, creating a negative impact on brand perception. So, you got a little of that sliding into this conversation too in the next few years.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to be a brand. I really think you'll see Marriott break up. I think you'll see them spin off brands and sell them to other companies. I wouldn't be surprised to see Blackstone step back in. Blackstone.
Blackstone, I can see them just going gobble.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Blackstone step in and buy, 6 of the brands from Marriott and do what they did with Hilton. Take it private, rebuild it, get it going, take it public, and then exit it, just like they did with Hilton.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be very interesting the next couple of years of what the brand landscape is going to look like, because it's funny, prior to COVID, it looked like brands were taking over. It looked like the scale game was starting to work out, looked like they were, able to just randomly make up new brands so they can stuff more keys into a market without violating their agreements. And all of that seemed to be wind at their back. But now you look at it, and I think there's a high probability that a Marriott ends up coming out of this a much smaller company than they were even before they bought Starwood.
Mm-hmm.
In order to survive, in order for the name to, continue to exist. I wouldn't even be surprised, if I was playing chess master, I'd swoop in, buy Wyndham, take them private. I would use Wyndham's infrastructure to then buy a random selection of Hilton and Marriott's brands away from them and put it onto the Wyndham platform. And then I'd take Wyndham public, because Wyndham, of the 3 kind of big companies, is the only one that's always been a franchise system. Their business is built as a brand that is a franchise system, not a brand that at one point owned hotels and, kind of built a pretty big strategy, a pretty big ship that's been going in the same direction, and then sold all their hotels and now goes, we're a franchise company. Well, part of that pain is what I think is happening in Hilton and Marriott is they're asset light, but they never fully changed their business to be franchise businesses. They're still very much stuck in certain areas as what's in our best interest as someone who owns the most valuable assets of this brand and, is a franchise to the ones that aren't.
See, okay, I don't disagree with you on that, and I actually think that's obviously it's a very smart combination of what potential could be. I also see there's a fragmentation possibility. I think that Marriott doesn't want to be Atlas anymore and carry the world, or can't in the current circumstances. In short future tense, I don't think they can be the Atlas that carries the world. And I think that there's going to be a splintering, similar-esque to the EU model, where there's a regionality of dominance, whether it be country-based or regional-based, that there are certain predominant features in certain regions of hotels that exist, so that the Northwest, Northeast, Southwest, Southeast, whatever way segmentations develop, that there is going to be a regionality development, a possible regionality of branding that goes on, and allowance of, going even with the Blackstone model, but going to the sense that the regionality is in itself its own entity, and that it runs and operates under the context that if you're traveling to the Northwest, this brand X is the brand of that region.
Well, you think in Kimpton.
Yeah, you know, actually, you know what? Yeah, as you bring it up, it probably is in a similar variation to that, where it's like, look, when you're looking at this is what you're looking at in that market. This they got it right in this market, and over down
Mhm.
here, they have it right in this market. And they're not the same company, but maybe tied in some capacity, maybe
Yep.
through loyalties or memberships or what have you. There's a value proposition to this, and that Marriott steps up to a higher tier of we'll coordinate the data, but we're out of the lower tiered branding.
Can't get out of the lower tier stuff. I mean, Marriott makes the majority of their value on the lower tier collection. We all think of their marquee hotels when we think of Marriott, but let's face it, there's way more courtyards, there's way more residence
Mhm.
inns, there's way more rooms and revenue in those chains than there are in Marriott, like full service. You know, so it's inevitable. They're going to, I'm just going to call it now. We can come back on this and I'll do an I told you so. I am saying that Marriott will sell half their brands due to this crisis. And I'm willing to bet you it's a Blackstone that does it. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Blackstone doesn't scoop up a platform company like, you know, do you grab an Accor? Do you grab a Wyndham, you know, who have, you know, the correct setup for a franchise system, which by the way, a franchise system, you're a franchise. You let your hotels do things to customize their needs to their business. So, you know, Wyndhams all can use many selections of different email vendors. They can all use many selection of different vendors to have their own sites. They're even allowed, certain Wyndhams are allowed to have their own version of Synixis that isn't part of the corporate stack for their own site. So why did they do that? Because that's how you get franchises, and that's how you keep franchises happy without having to get bloated in services that your services are not going to be as good. I'm sorry, you can build a marketing team all you want. Your marketing team isn't going to be as good as hiring a fuel. Because why? Because fuel is specialty and isn't, trying to serve 15,000 different needs. They picked a band of what their focus is and they kill it. They're great at it. And, that's you can't compete with that as a
When you
large
say fuel, you mean Melissa, not necessarily Stuart, right?
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
Okay,
If that
okay.
wasn't clear.
The real fuel. The
Yeah.
real fuel.
The real fuel. Like the people
I'm
who
really
actually do this
surprised
stuff.
Stuart even shows up to the show anymore.
Wow.
So
Okay, so wait a minute. Why didn't you mention Hyatt or Omni, which are wounded soldiers right now?
well, I actually think the opposite will happen with them. I think they will end up either in a roll up. So I think you'll end up seeing them merge into someone. So where I think a Marriott is going to get broken up, I think you may see, and I mean honestly, even Hyatt and Omni together as a merger would make sense. They're almost the same focus. The consistency you would get from having basically every really nice convention hotel.
Right.
Because between the two of them, pretty much every major city has a really nice Hyatt or a really nice Omni, and they
Right.
serve the same customer, right? So I think
support
you'll
this
see.
idea.
I think you'd see players like that merge, and then I think you'll see the large players that have kind of overextended on brands without changing their core as a business. I think you'll see them broken up.
I have somebody persistent knocking on my door. Give me just a second. If you guys, I'm sorry, Melissa, if you want to get back to some of the conversation, I'm going to black out for just a second, see why this person keeps knocking on my door and peeking through my window. My apologies. I'll be right back.
We got to make sure that Lily gets to number 10.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do need to stick on number 8 for just another minute longer because there was some really interesting stuff that came out of this question. So first of all, first time, this question has been asked on every survey. This is the first time that we did not have a positive thing about people wanting to hear from hotels. So that number saying people don't want to hear increased from 18 up to 26%, which is not good. And that goes along with that increase of people saying nothing could convince them to travel. The other thing, talking about pricing, Those asking for packaging and specials decreased from 53 down to 45%. So again, goes along with the budget concerns dropping in rank as well. So pricing not nearly as important. That said, going back to our mask people and our non-mask people, those people who prefer to not have masks actually did rank packages and specials as their number one thing, which I thought was really kind of interesting. Since it's ranked number 4 overall.
So
I
it's
don't think.
I'm sensing a tone of selfishness, maybe in a certain percentage of your respondents.
Yeah, humanity is great. Everyone's wonderful.
Everywhere.
I mean, if that's anything that this has taught us, is that's true.
I will say this from hard data, because that is my job. Looking at the number one response of property doing what's right for their guests. I sat in on a client meeting this morning of a company that has a dozen or so independent properties. And both in June and in May, several of their properties saw bookings coming in from natural search people landing on their safety procedure pages. Was it a bajillion dollars in revenue? No, we're talking about 50 to 100 people and a handful of bookings, but nonetheless, super highly qualified. Clearly, that's last click. So this was the deciding factor in somebody making a booking, was looking at this page of what the hotel is doing to protect them.
Yeah, which falls into like what my suggestion was in the beginning of this, which is invest in communicating that, make it easily found. Just don't beat everyone over the head with it, because it will turn off some people. So instead, make it very easy to find for the people who care about it. And for the people who care about it, it will move the needle quite a bit.
All right. I guess we'll move on to number 10, because it seems to be a hot topic. How soon will you be willing to make the following trips? And we've asked this again on, I think, every version of the survey, looking at distance from home and the 2-hour drive. Still hot, as certainly compared to everything else. Flying, still nobody's doing, but everything within 0 to 3 months has gone down since the last survey, and everything basically 6 months to more than a year has increased.
But what's really interesting to me about this is that people are less willing to stay less than 2 hours from home. So I think that it's kind of that, and I totally get this because I feel the same way about staycations once in a while. I don't really feel like I've gotten away. I don't really feel like I get that mental break. So while we've been really having people focus on the drive market, it may even help some of our listeners be more granular in their marketing spend when they're looking at geo targeting specifically, to say, you know what, I really need to look at this radius, but I kind of need to look at this band within the radius instead of from here out. You're looking at a very specific target. Not that you shouldn't maybe go within there, because there's still, between people who are willing to do it within 1 month or 1 to 3 months, you've still got 30% of the respondents. So that's a decent number of people. You don't want to leave them on the wayside, but perhaps you simply prioritize more that 2-hour kind of radius there.
Well, and I wonder how much of this also decreased because of how much travel has happened since you first started doing this. That dynamic, because we know a lot of people have traveled. So I wonder what that does to this data.
It's certainly not the majority of people though that have traveled. Like, because there's other questions we ask about.
We're still over 60% who have not booked.
Yeah. Right. So I think it does skew it a little bit, and I think that the local thing is skewed for a couple of reasons. We did break this question down a few issues ago, where we looked at it geographically to see if there was any correlation between the people that were saying I wouldn't travel within 2 hours and where they lived. Was it a hot spot? And there does seem to be some kind of crossover there. So that kind of plays in. But I think what Lily's touching on is important, because if people are traveling 2 hours, they're probably going to stay maybe an extra day or two than someone that's just traveling 30 minutes, right? So that might be a one-night stay. So right now, when we're trying to maximize occupancy, trying to look for people that are not just going to stay at my hotel, but are going to be valuable staying at my hotel is critical. So that 2 hours to 4 hour band that you're talking about is really the prime people to be targeting.
Can you guys, for the next one, ditch the local area and add an hour and 3 hours so we can see the granularity between 1, 2, and 3 hours? Because that could be interesting. Because local area, first of all, what's tough about that is it's a different definition for everyone, right? But if you remove that and did 1 hour, 2 hour, and 3 hours, you could get some granularity on if there's any difference by those circles of radius. Because heck, for me, pre-COVID, 1 hour would be traveling to International Drive, which is only 17 miles.
Yeah. Well, even in the news, I caught the ear of the fact that Airbnb was talking about, or vacation travel in general was talking about, that most people are doing a 300 mile. That's their distance travel.
Lauren, the only question people have for you is, who was it?
Somebody left their windows down in a car in the parking lot. It started raining. They thought it was mine.
And Lauren said, I don't have a car.
It's like, oh, no, I have no clue who that is.
That was very neighborly.
That was very nice.
That was very neighborly. Yeah, it wasn't my car, but it was the next door neighbor. So I knocked on their door and told them that their car was getting wet, and they ran out. So yeah, that was nice of them, though. It was
a different version of a Florida man.
What is rain anyway? Just curious. I keep hearing about this rain thing, and I'm just wondering what that means.
We're getting back to our Florida pattern of late afternoon for us, which is nice, because we were running a little bone dry for a while, but we're back to the 3 o'clock or now 1 o'clock rain cycle. So
yeah, we're a month into monsoon season and not a drop to be had.
Ouch.
So it's fire season instead.
So I find it interesting that 74% of your respondents never travel to ski destinations.
I agree. I thought that was fascinating, and I wondered if that had anything to do with geography of where they're based.
Yeah, and also the sample, the database that we have, it's from our city.com databases, which skews to more beachy type destinations. So I think that there's some bias in there.
It's funny. I always thought the answers to the ski destination was because you started asking this when there was no longer any ski in North America.
Yeah.
But now I'm looking at it going, or it's literally these consumers do not ski.
I think
so I think it would be interesting, Melissa, on this question, if you also then just remove the set of people who said they never traveled to that destination and break down the percentages with those eliminated for each destination, just so we could see, percentage, unless of course that makes it statistically irrelevant, which you would have to know behind the scenes on the numbers.
Yeah, I think we could probably do that. The sample size is still over 5,000, so I think we could probably still be relevant.
Of people who travel to this, right?
Yeah. We didn't add that choice of I don't normally travel here anyway until recently. It used to be those
Yeah, I
things.
was just saying, 74.3% of people don't travel to a ski destination. So let's just say, for the sake of ease, you have 100 people, right? So roughly 25 people do. So of the 25 who do sometimes travel, where do they fall? More than a year, blah, blah, blah. So what percentage is that?
I just figured out the super secret tricky strategy you all have been playing here. So you've been putting out all these free data reports, and then you start introducing answers that invalidate all the previous insights. Are you heading towards a paid report?
No one would ever do that in this industry, right?
No, never.
Hey, I have a question, and because I've never had a client that had the differentiation of this, so that's why it's a legit question. Is there a distinction between people that travel to lakes versus people that travel into the mountains or the things like that? Or is it the same traveler?
Who are you asking?
I don't know, just in general, because you have the Smoky Mountains and everything behind you and so forth. So I'm sure there's some demographic similarities to people coming to your market in the beach area and in central Atlantic region, and then of course the choice of going to the Smokies or going to the Appalachians or whatever, and having that experience. And then how does that equate to people that go to lakeside? I mean, not all lakes are in hills, obviously. You know, is there a distinction between people that travel to the hill country and enjoy the mountains and things like that versus lake vacations? I mean, we are splitting hairs. I mean, is there a distinction in the categorization of those people? I'm just, as you're talking about the distinction between skiing versus non-skiing, I was like, I never really knew if there was much of a difference between somebody wanting to go to a lake versus wanting to go to the mountains or the hills. I don't know if there's a difference.
Difference in what dimensions? Like I'm having
Their desire to go. Like, is it for them to go to the hills or the mountains because there's a lake there, or a lake is a lake, and if it's flat and an open area and the lake is still a lake? I mean, is it a prerequisite that they like going to the hills and hence the lake is the next option? Or is it, I'll go to a lake and the hills have nothing to do with it? I mean,
as someone that has recently been to a lake trip, it had nothing to do with hills.
Okay. Like I said, I don't know.
I will say, however, it may just be more of a scale than a yes or no question.
Okay.
Because you might have, if you're choosing between a lake in the middle of Kansas, not even sure they have any, I don't know, but anyway, Kansas is the most flat place I could think of. So a lake in the middle of Kansas, or going to Santa Barbara, where you have a beach next to the mountains and you can have both experiences within the same city, I'd pick Santa Barbara every time. However, if I'm just going out and looking for a lake and I can't afford Santa Barbara because their weekend rates even now are over $400 at most hotels, then the lake in Kansas might be a contender for me. So I think that it just kind of depends on so many factors. It's hard to get a yes or no. From my
look at some trends.
I think the answer is 2.
42.
42.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to look at the attributes that each of those types of destination have, right? You know, is it indoors or outdoors? Is it spacious or compact? Is there a lot going on or not? Like, I think some of the attributes overlay each other. There are similarities, but there are also differences as well.
Yeah. No, I think Liz is right. I think it's more of a degree of what it is that they're interested in doing, not so much that it is a lake or not, or hills or not. It's about whether or not what they're wanting to do is incorporated in what that includes. So yeah.
All right. I've got one more question because we've got 6 minutes left.
Woohoo!
Got to get to number 12, which is looking at different types of amenities. So we've asked this question, I think, on the last 3 surveys now. The staggering difference between these results and the ones 3 weeks ago just really blew my mind. Just looking just at the outdoor pool alone, those who would definitely use an outdoor pool was at 44%, we're down to 27%. The second most popular amenity was the lazy river, which was over 30%. We're now down to 18% who would definitely use it in 3 weeks' time, in peak summer right now. Wow. And then to layer on top of that, the mask debacle, whoa, whole different thing. So much fun. People who would like a mask ordinance, they're only 20% to use an outdoor pool versus almost 40% of people who do not want a mask ordinance. And looking at restaurants, again, so different, and specifically looking at indoor restaurants, whether it be on property or locally, so incredibly different of people's behavior. Everything has just shrunk compared to last time.
And once again, we come back to the terrible twos. I want what I want. I'm going to go in the pool. I shouldn't have to wear a mask, but everybody else should.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I can cover it by just being the dork that wears the snorkel the whole time.
I'm good with a coffee filter over the top. Look, it's like a mask.
Yeah, over the top of the snork. And then I'll just walk with my flippers too, because gosh knows that doesn't add to the visualization.
Yeah.
Little Hawaiian shorty briefs. I'm looking good.
Look like Bigfoot on vacation.
You know,
Yeah.
I had an interesting thought while I was traveling that I don't think I've heard come up on this show. So I'm actually just curious if any
What?
of you have
Whoa,
heard
whoa,
about
whoa!
this.
We can't have new thoughts on
What?
the show. We just got to
I know.
regurgitate last
I
week's
don't know.
episode.
Yeah.
repeatedly.
We're going to beat it like
Stuart,
a dead horse by a well. Come on.
Yeah.
Stuart, to weigh in on this, you have to be on the show at least as often as I am.
Ooh.
All
Snap.
right. Here's the thing: Lauren keeps a tally. We can have that competition.
Okay, okay. So, but you know, we've seen a lot about, you know, we're using electrostatic sprayers, we're using this, we're using that, the most frequently touched items in the room. But it wasn't till I was in a hotel room, right, where I had to actually use things that I thought, what about the coffees, or I don't use the body lotion, things like that. These little items, these amenities, are they just being left in the room for the next guest? Because what I haven't seen is somebody saying, hey, when you check out, we'll remove all of the usable items from your room, and you know, we might reuse them, but we'll take them out and put them somewhere else for like 3 days to ensure they're not contaminated, and then reintroduce them. I haven't seen anything like that, and I think that
Well,
So
that would be very
some of my hotels actually have turned it into a way to make it feel special. So they've created these little packs that
Right,
you
they
get
hand
at
out at
that
the
you get
desk.
at check-in that have all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think
in
that's
it.
a
The
smart way to
Compass
do it.
Hotel that just opened up in Anna Maria Sound, that is a part of your welcome pack for the Keurig machines in the rooms, is your coffee pods, your sugars, the swizzles, and all that other kind of stuff. And as sad as it sounds, the safety of it is what is unused gets tossed.
Right.
It's a
Take it
sad
with
thing
you,
because I would
make
love to
sure.
think it would be something that could be used, but right now to ensure that the question doesn't come up, what am I touching? They're just cleaning that out and all the soaps, and it is sad because we are losing our recycle capabilities right now.
Well, and I heard if you go to a Four Seasons, they throw out everything in the room: mattress, remotes, televisions,
What
like
the hell?
every
Yeah, why
room
not? Of
turns,
course,
they
you
strip
pay
it
for it
fully
anyway when you
down.
walk to the door. Why not?
They
Yeah.
just
Bring it with
burn
you.
it
Bring it with
down
you.
to the
Take a picture off the
studs,
wall. It's
and
yours.
then
Yeah.
they redo it. No, I just thought that was really interesting, and probably for maybe those that are independent and have more control over what they're communicating, I think it's a smart move to do something like what Stuart was saying, where it's a pack at the front desk, commit to removing everything, whatever the case may
Did
be.
Stuart just get credit for what I
I
said?
got
Sorry,
credit for
Ed.
your thing.
Dang, that always happens.
No one listens to
I
you.
was
Ed.
looking at Ed and
Wow.
said Stuart. I don't know where that came
Dang.
from.
I'll take
Anyway,
credit.
It's such a pity because
Nobody
so many
stole it.
hotels have invested so much into going eco-friendly with the large shareable items. It is such a pity
Yeah.
that is just tossed out the window.
It's on the shelf.
Yeah.
That's on the shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked on our podcast last week's episode about how environmental concerns have just fallen out of the
Styrofoam
everyone's mindset.
containers, just
Not a priority anymore.
Yeah.
Really sad.
Just whatever it takes to get it. Yeah.
Why
Helen-
save the
Helen-
world if we're all gonna die?
Elena went
and
on
on
point
that
out, she says,
happy note,
I think people are canceling their beach vacations if they have to wear a mask on the beach. I think to refine that statement a little bit more is, and being firsthand down here in Southwest Florida, masks are being requested if you can't keep distancing.
Right.
And that's been an issue because unfortunately with everything being in crisis mode on the East Coast, everybody's been migrating to the West Coast. So even in best efforts of trying to regulate how many people, they even shut down the beach. I think I mentioned this on a previous show. You get to go in the morning and then they kick you off and then you go back. Well, all they're doing is you're pushing everybody at the pools at the hotels. Good job. And so, it's also just that fact that they can't keep distancing. So you're wearing a mask. But
And
makes some pretty
I
sexy
think
skin
most
lines. So
mask
just,
mandates have that built into them, that if you
Yeah.
cannot socially distance, a mask is required.
Right.
So
I think it's
really, I
absurd.
mean, if you think about that, because I wouldn't want to wear a mask all day out on a hot beach.
Right.
So I don't think any of the beaches have a requirement that you have to wear a mask well on the beach. You just have to wear a mask when you're in situations where you can't be distant. Right. Now, that being said, I do not know how people are going to Disney and Universal right now because you have to wear a mask the whole time you're in the park.
Yeah.
And it has been unruly hot here for like the last 2 weeks to where, I pop my mask on when I'm in my truck to then walk out to go somewhere where I have to wear a mask. And that little walk in the parking lot, I couldn't imagine being in a theme park all day with a mask on.
I can't believe how whiny the human race has become about masks. Is it inconvenient? Sure. Like, would I prefer not to? Sure. But it's not as bad as everyone's saying. For real people, everyone needs to just chill a little
Well,
bit.
I got to say, there's some great examples of this. I think when people tout about this, it's like, why do you wear clothes?
Right.
I mean,
I would
you know,
much prefer not to wear pants when I go out in public. It would be
you
way
know,
more
hey, what do we do on the show right now? I mean, hey, this all looks good, but don't stand up.
One of my favorite comparisons is my wife showed me this on Facebook. Men are not going to understand this, but I think the women will appreciate it. Is taking your mask off at the end of the day is like taking your bra off at the end of the day. It's like that thing you don't wear the bra for yourself. You wear it for other people, is what she said. So it's like that same relief you get, but you learn new behaviors. You learn to tolerate whatever it is, you know. And it's inconvenient. Would I prefer not to wear a mask? Probably, but it's
actually, I got to be honest with you. I prefer to wear a mask because then I'm not sitting there thinking about how gross the people around me are because they're wearing masks and I'm wearing masks. I actually prefer that dynamic. I just wouldn't go to a theme park and in a temperature that feels like 105 degrees. Sure. Now, to be fair, I probably wouldn't go to the theme park anyways this time of year. But I definitely wouldn't.
Wearing a shirt is making you hot, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it's. But I also think the other problem here is again, and I like to point this out, is people think different things when they say something, and I think so many people when they hear mask, they think the N95 mask, which is not designed to be worn nonstop all day. You will deprive yourself of oxygen if you do that. It's meant to be worn in spurts with breaks in between because it's a serious mask. The cheap, these masks, these can be worn all day. They don't change your oxygen intake at all. It's just fabric. You're breathing through fabric. It's no different than wearing a scarf over your face, which if you grew up in the Northeast, you do that for most of the year. So the whole anti-mask mentality just to me is crazy, but it's also rooted in our government for a period of time at the beginning of this whole issue straight up said masks didn't do anything, and they were doing that to stop people from rushing and buying all of the masks and causing an issue for the medical workers and things like that. That's the government just needs to come out and say, hey, we were lying to you then. And we were doing it so we, could keep you safe. But yeah, masks work, and they always have.
Well, the good news is we have a president that's really good at admitting when he's wrong. So I'm sure that'll happen next week.
Humble is the first word that comes to mind, actually.
Absolutely. Yes. Selfless.
Yeah.
Have you guys caught his new look? He's toning down the orange.
I think he's afraid to go outside and meet the public, and so he can't get to the tanning booth.
Yeah, he's less orange than usual.
Is that a measuring scale? I mean, is there like a orangeometer?
When you're as orange as he was, yes.
Yeah, I think there is a scale to it. I have, of course, I'm on a lot of quarantini calls in Canada and so forth, and of course, always hearing the Canadians' perspective as to our interesting culture we have here now is always enlightening and fun because they're doing good things. Vancouver especially is in level 3 opening right now, which is the fastest out of the entire country of Canada at this point. Their restaurants and bars are open. They have restrictions and they are enforcing those restrictions. They'll slap a license or a fee on anybody that's in violation of this stuff. And they're very adamant.
They will follow us. They're Canadian. They're not Americans.
Yeah. Meanwhile, now we're looking at the fact that other people in Canada, because their borders are so closed, are actually looking to travel to Vancouver because they are being able to take advantage of the fact that there is that infrastructure in place for them at that point. So we're still so far behind that right now. We don't know where to travel. We're like the people running away from one fire to the next. It's like, wait a minute, no, wait, this is a hotspot. Let's go here. No, this is a hotspot.
I am the thing I'm most interested in watching, and this will be telling of how long it's going to take us to recover, is when can the major cities open back up public transportation safely? Because that's where I believe most of New York's problems came from, is public transportation. And I don't see how you can open back up public transportation and not have it turn into just a massive, spread event that will be similar to the first wave that New York saw. And
What's
so
time bomb, right? Though, because right now, if you opened it, probably not a whole lot would happen because there's not the volume of people using it. Right?
I think you open the public transportation in New York, it will immediately get to an issue again. I mean, they didn't initially close it and it was packed.
Yeah.
It was packed. So that was when there was lockdown in effect, stay-at-home orders, all that. And, there's so many people that need public transportation to get around that city that are first line, frontline workers, things like that. So this is the measuring stick of how long it's going to be, to me, is when the cities open their public transportation up, what does that do to the virus? Because that really is like, how do you get their economies working again? New York will not be at full pumping economy without its public transportation because there's no other way to get around.
I think they should open up the secret subway system that we all know exists in the conspiracy theory world.
Yeah, but that's only for billionaires, Lauren.
Well,
a few more million to earn, you'll be all right. You'll be close. So is anyone else looking forward to the next raging debate that's going to happen when eventually a vaccine comes out? And they're predicting it could be as, rolling out as early as January, but I think that maybe is optimistic. But when the vaccine comes out, we're going to switch gears completely to, this whole the vaccines work, is the government trying to control us? So that we got that to look forward to.
Bill Gates!
The anti-vaxxers are going to come back strong. Right now it's the anti-maskers, but it'll switch back to
it's the same crowd. So I actually think what's more promising than vaccines is actually some of the recent discoveries in treatment that potentially knock this down to being about as serious as a cold. There have been a couple of research pieces that are now going into human trials. One of them out of Israeli scientists were discovered through the way that the coronavirus acts, that what's actually causing the respiratory failure, the kidney failure, the liver failure is actually the way the coronavirus is affecting our body's ability to process lipids. And so it's causing lipids to build up in the lungs and in any of the fatty organs. And that's actually what's causing the problem. And so they, through their research, figured out that using a cholesterol medication like Tricor, which is one of the most popular, easily available, super cheap drugs, it would actually jumpstart the processing, get all the buildup out, and you would just be down to not feeling well. Like you wouldn't have what's been causing the spiraling in the cases.
And here I've been drinking bleach thinking that Trump was right. Dang it.
So there's that, and then there's another inhibitor that again is using an old drug, an off-the-shelf drug, that claims it kills the ability for the virus to reproduce. I think treatments like that are more likely to solve than vaccine will be, because vaccines are tricky, and we can see it in 2018. The two flu vaccines we picked were wrong, and it was one of the worst flu seasons that we've seen. It actually, and you can compare. I was looking at it just out of curiosity. That year's flu for the state of Florida is very close to the same mortality rate that we're having with COVID right now. I mean, and it was serious. It was like a 20% bump in additional deaths from that year of flu. And, that's kind of what we're heading towards, 30-40% now, but that's kind of where we're at. And so, I think treatment is a far more important focus than vaccination, because treatment, even the anti-vaxxers will get treated because they don't want to die.
Well, I mean, to your point, I mean, they're already talking about, the medical professionals already talking about the fact that it's painful to say, but there are people that passed early in this pandemic that would have survived now based on what they've learned on how to treat people better than they treated them initially, not knowing what to do. And the doctor was very specific about rolling them over face down, blah, 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 giving the fluid. There was very things that they learned very quickly, not going immediately to a respirator and so forth, because that creates the trauma. And they're going through. And to your point, as the treatments get better, we'll be able to mitigate this better in the long term, which is really the scary point. A lot of the uncertainty aspect of this is the fact that we don't know how we as an individual react to getting this and the long-term effect of what it creates for us. I mean, that's now a new question that's coming up is what's the long-term impact of this? People are talking about weeks afterwards of getting it, fatigue and, so forth and so on. What's the long-term of this? So to your point, Ed, the treatment capability of what are those symptomatic creators? What do you do about those things, the lipids or whatever? How do those things get done more effectively? Because you said with the vaccine, you're always going to have the pros, the cons. Does it work? Doesn't it work? But like with the flu, which has been around for a long period of time, we've learned better ways to treat it. Long ago, people would pass away for not being treated right. Now we know we put them into a coma. Boom. All right, let's go over and freak them out and let the whatever the swelling stuff pass without them being conscious.
One of the other problems, and I more wanted to bring it up because it just made me chuckle, was Orange County, Florida. Health officials were talking about the cases, the deaths that have happened. And we've had 2 people in their 20s die. So the reporters were asking, well, did they have known pre-existing conditions? What's the deal? Sorry. And the guy answers, well, one of them did. The other one died of a motorcycle accident.
Okay. Bad number, that one.
He had COVID, though.
And that goes into where did these numbers come from kind of thing, because we have the issue down here where there was getting 100% positive testing, and
that's everywhere in Florida. Orlando Health's lab, which is one of the bigger testing labs, was 98% positive rate. It was supposed to be 9.8%.
So we had a friend here locally that went to go get tested. Some of his family got tested, but he ended up not because the lines were too long. And then got a letter the next week saying he was positive. Didn't have the test.
Wow.
And this is why we need a third political party. I want a political party that agrees that the government does things poorly, because that's exactly what we're talking about.
Kanye West.
But wants people to be able to be successful. All people. Can we get that?
Kanye
Is that
West.
Kanye? Well, no, because Kanye doesn't want Taylor Swift to do well. We've seen that.
He does now. He's apologized for that. He just, he did it out of love for Beyonce.
That's
okay.
right.
All right. We are at 2 hours and 15 minutes of happy conversation. And boy, did we go down the old pandemic rabbit hole in that one.
Well, we did get through 12 of the questions.
We did. I think that's a record.
Well, you were doing well, and then I came on, and that was
right. That was the end.
My under 7 got totally blown out of the water. Despite my best efforts to hold Melissa back, it didn't work. Lily kept interjecting with, let's listen to Melissa.
Even Ben, I have to give Ben some credit this week.
Yeah, he kind of he quoted Lily a couple of times. Like,
a little bit there.
Yeah,
by the way, Ben is a great follow on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yeah, he's been doing some good
stuff. Yeah.
He is a really good follow on LinkedIn.
Tris
too, yeah.
Yep.
It's kind of like watching somebody emerge into the market. I mean, they're going 100 miles an hour on stuff. It's a pleasure to see them do that. So it's stuff on that.
It's fun. I've known them for a while, and they've always been a little bit shackled, right? A travel tripper and a Pegasus. They always had some kind of corporate hanging over them, right? And seeing what they're doing, creating with just the 2 of them is entertaining for sure.
Yeah. And then Stuart, well, I get the chance to thank you for both for Lily and I for being able to speak to the Myrtle Chamber and CBB.
Yeah, I caught the end of it. Yes, I caught the last 20 minutes or so yesterday.
You caught Lauren's list of tools then.
I did. List of tools.
I think that was the 20 minutes.
Shotgun fire hose of 27 things you should use right now.
Yeah.
No, I think it was great. I appreciate the introduction as well. I know there's probably a recording being made available. So hopefully we'll be able to distribute that, but it was great.
Yeah, and I think, if you guys have ideas for other topics you want to share, I think they're all about it. So.
Well, along those lines, although it's not specifically for Visit Myrtle Beach, please do check out our AHOA webinar coming up on July 22nd. I put a link to register over here in the comments. But basically, we are talking about the getting back to business for those markets that are looking for some strategies to drive additional business. And it's a pretty star cast, besides me. But outside of that, we've got Susan Berry from Hive Marketing. We've got Amy Infanti from GetGo, our very own Stephanie from Cogwheel, Kat as well from the live show will be moderating it. So, and also Tammy Gillis from Gillis Sales. So I think that it's going to be a really, really great webinar. And, you know, if
And
you're...
can I just say, from a diversity standpoint, that's awesome that it's all females. I think that's great.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
not many all
Not
female
diverse
webinars.
at all. Female only.
Yeah.
It's free to women, and if you're a man and you want to attend, you have to pay $5.
And maybe it's like you guys are the new Spice Girls.
Hey, I like
Girl
that.
group.
Really want, yeah, okay.
I'm working towards Sporty Spice.
That was
right
the
now.
most man response to celebrating.
That's the only song I
To
know.
celebrating, wow, how
only
great
one I
is
know
it
they
that
ever
all
did. I
these
remember it all
powerful
right now.
women
All I got.
are
Yeah, all I got.
educating the world,
Girl
and
power.
only a man would go,
I'll
Spice
tell you what
Girls.
Girl
yeah,
power.
that's all I got. That's all I got.
Hey,
gosh.
the irony was fully intended. So
So going now to Melissa again, who is the star of the show today. Melissa, we're not going to ask Stuart this question. If people want to know more about you and more about Fuel Travel and all the cool stuff that you do, where can they find you?
did you say cruel stuff or cool stuff?
Cool stuff. Cool stuff.
Okay.
You can find all things related to fuel, including the award-winning podcast at fueltravel.com. If you want to connect with me, I am on LinkedIn, and my last name is Kavanagh with a K and no U. Maybe one day I'll marry a Smith and things will get better. Or I'm on Twitter at @MAKavanagh.
Excellent. Mr. Dell, where is it that people can find you?
It's official. Next month, I'm launching my own new company, Aspire Reputation, and I look forward to helping hoteliers around the world get fantastic reviews and become top of their market on TripAdvisor and on other review sites. And if you have anything I can help you with or any questions, you can reach me at Adele at aspirereputation.com.
Awesome. Miss Lily, where is it people can find you? What do you do?
You can find us at tcrmservices.com, where we do all things day-to-day revenue management. Also, shameless plug because I am famous for those also. We are introducing a new commission-based revenue management model where you pay only for performance. So if you're interested in anything like that in the midst of things so that it can flex with your revenues, please let us know. You can email me at lily@tcrmservices.com. That's 1L. And then you can also find our podcast at thinkupenterprises.com. We just released a new one from a mixed use style hotel group called Lodge Camps. Some pretty interesting stuff in there. We're doing hospitality highlights right now. And on the Fuel Travel award-winning podcast, I was very happy to say that when I reviewed that, all of the advice I gave, 6 or 8 weeks ago on the Fuel podcast, still applies, which is very hard to do these days. So, episode 149, if you check out Fuel.
But compared to Ed's advice that is perishable by the end of the call, I mean,
I've put out some of those myself where I'm like, well, this no longer applies. Moving on to
like
the new reality.
fresh is only for as good as the. Yeah, okay.
Right. Yep. But my tips on this episode are timeless. So there you go.
Yeah.
Mr. Ed, if you want to know about the amazing Flip2 and the amazing Mr. St. Ange, where is it they can find you?
You can go to Flip2, flip.to. You can find me on social media, Edward St. Ange. You can find myself and Lauren Gray in August doing a super cool presentation for the Quebec chapter of HSMAI, which, fun fact, is one of the newest chapters of HSMAI. They had their first event just before COVID. And actually, believe it or not, we will be releasing a podcast here shortly. Yes, this won't be competing because it's not going to be a weekly podcast. This is where we will start releasing some interviews we've been doing lately with some really interesting people from our industry. So keep an eye out for that as well. And Lauren Gray, if people want to sit on a couch with a truckload of chips and for some reason burn their eyeballs with a month and a half straight, 24 hours a day stream of this show, or find out what you do, where should they go?
Well, first off, I recommend you buy those same little things they used in Clockwork Orange, just because you're going to need them. Because you're going to want to close your eyes after the first show. No. Actually, we missed Stuart. I got to say, we got to hit Stuart first. Stuart, I know we're talking about travel, but you are your own celebrity, your own, you're the leader of many-ish. Where can they find you?
You can't call yourself a leader when no one follows you. You're just kind of a nomad. Yeah. You can find me anywhere on social media at Stuart Butler. And if you're interested in reducing contact during the check-in process, we are having a lot of success right now with our mobile app product, which allows keyless entry, contactless check-in, all that fun stuff. So if you're interested in that, go to fueltravel.com/mobile. Learn about our awesome product.
Awesome. Well, just as a note to everyone, we are. I've been very diligent on trying to keep this translated. We're in 8 languages now on the subtitles. I'm going to add Tahitian for Stuart's benefit because he likes it in his native. But no, we are in German, French, Spanish, Dutch, Hindu, Filipino, and of course, baseline English. In the subtitles, and also we did our first Spanish rendition of the podcast, where there's a female person in Spanish. So we have that. And if any language we're missing, if somebody feels that we were missing a language, I was thinking about dropping in Japanese next because we are getting a bit of an audience from Japan. Or 1.2% of our listenership from the past 2 weeks has been from Japan.
Wow.
So I was thinking about throwing in some Japanese in there. But anyway, you can find this and all previous 257 episodes of This Week in Hospitality Marketing at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. I will be putting out Lily's newest podcast here today, and I'll be putting out my newest podcast, which is the marketing version of her revenue one, so I get to disagree with everything she says. And we also have a sales one. We have to make sure that Holly gets thrown in this too. She does a sales podcast as well. She's on a bi-weekly though. So if you want to look for hospitality sales podcast, that's Holly's. Revenue management, hospitality revenue management is Lily's, and then marketing, hospitality marketing is ours. And then of course the one that supersedes all of us, which is the award-winning podcast, is the Fuel Travel podcast. Which, until we all get our little pedigrees, we got to sit underneath. But, we'll look up to you for a while. So with that in mind, thank you. Show number 259 next week. Hopefully, we'll be able to get our food and beverage guy on. He's had, as we mentioned, some time constraint issues with family, unfortunately, medical issues and so forth. So hopefully, we'll try to get him on for next week. Melissa, as always, we love that when you can come on and upstage Stuart, which, easy to do, but always fun to have.
I just need to retire at this point.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, he's going to stop coming to the show if we keep giving him such a hard time.
Oh, no. Stuart's loyal and faithful and kind. And besides, he's eye candy for us. If we didn't have Stuart on,
I do want you to tally out since the beginning of the year. I want you to tell us.
I'll pull out.
Give us the ranking. I think Lily might be number one, but I think I'm close with her.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll do a little attendance card for the start of the years to who's been there the whole time. I gotta say, Edward's probably going to beat most of us. He's been popping in pretty regularly, But anyway,
he shows up late, fashionably late. He's in here for 5 minutes.
That's true. He has been fashionably late a few times now, and then Robert has been MIA, unfortunately, for all of his work. So it's a shame.
Yeah.
I only have about 4 recurring appointments on my calendar that I won't let anything interfere with, and this is one of them with rare.
All right, with that, till next Friday, show time 2:59, 11:30 Eastern US. A replay of this will be done on Australian time, Wednesday at 11:30, Sydney to be exact, time zone, and also at 11 o'clock a.m. Wednesday morning London time will be a replay of this show. And then we'll be also rebroadcasting this on LinkedIn, which we're still having technical difficulties with, on Monday at 2 p.m. We'll do a replay of the same show out again on LinkedIn as well. So with that in mind, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melissa, again for your time, and Stuart, of course, Lily, and everyone else that had to bow out a little earlier. We had 2.5 hours today. All right, we'll talk to everyone next week. Thank you.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.